What's that?
This is Monday, March 27th, 2017, at 4:30 p.m. in the Thomas J. Smith Council Chambers. This is our weekly work session. We have a proclamation for Youth Appreciation Week. We also have a couple of Mayor's Awards that we're going to be giving out. Number 3, we have a public hearing for consideration of the designation of the Deer Point Estates Urban Renewal Area and on proposed urban renewal plan and project. Mr. Tislin?
I can start this off. This urban renewal plan goes through, discusses what's required by Chapter 403 to establish an urban renewal area. And the urban renewal plan is for Deer Point Estates subdivision that has previously gone through the annexation process and the preliminary plat process with the City Council, which laid out 34 lots, as well as street extensions off South 14th Street and connections to Summer Street. The plan objectives is to meet the housing needs stated in the Des Moines County Housing Need Assessment, create a mechanism for financing the construction needs of infrastructure, generate funds that can be used to improve housing for low and moderate income families, and to generally improve the housing stock in the community. Some of the background, as previously discussed, homes varying in range from 180 to 275,000. Payment of the property tax increment derived from the property shall not exceed 836,317, with the total between those payments and LMI set aside at $1.35 million. A portion of the funds generated through this would be given back to the city to use for low and moderate income housing. That's kind of the general overview of the urban renewal plan. If you have
Eric, what was that number again? 86 what?
836,317 on
36.
the fourth page of the urban renewal plan, under description and use of TIF. The city, 38.4% of the increment generated goes back to the city for LMI set aside.
This becomes the maximum for those two funds. What actually comes in for what gets generated in that area is all going to would all be dependent on what the housing that was created, as well as the time frame in which it was created. For example, if he were to exceed his projected time frame and build quicker than what he has forecasted, and he were to have valuations that were higher than what we were put into that model, there would be more income generated than what's shown. The developer would be able to get his portion sooner, and the LMI portion that was set aside, the 400 or so thousand that Eric is mentioning, that went in a separate pot, would get set aside sooner once the full amount was reached, those maximum to exceeds. The funds from that point forward would be released to the underlying, would be able to be released to the underlying authorities. The other part of that is if the development does not occur as fast as what the developer has projected, he would not be able to receive the full value. He would receive just what was created and generated within the first 11 years. So the risk on this is on the developer to get things done quickly, and yet getting it done quicker than what he's shown does not provide him any additional funds. And I guess the other thing that he'll get into his project, but if you're going to consider using a TIF rebate and you're not doing this with other housing projects, you have to ask, why are you doing it?
Right.
And that's something that you all are going to have to weigh out individually, and you all are going to have different opinions on whether this is worth doing for a project such as this. Part of that discussion, and as you look at what he's presenting, when we had the housing needs assessment done here over a year and a half ago,
Last April.
that showed where our significant needs for housing was in two separate categories, below 180,000 and then 180 to 260, where there were significant shortfalls. It showed shortfalls in other areas as well, but the number was dramatically smaller than what those two categories was. A lot of the rental housing projects, such as what the Apollo is designed to be, could potentially hit at that below 180,000 type market. It might also be in that 180 to 260, depending on where he price points those rental units. This would particularly be in that 180 to 260 range. One of the things that we talked with Ryan about as he's presenting this, he's showing the 27 up to 275, and that's right in line with what our housing shortfall is saying is there. If you feel that there is a need to try to correct that problem, this is the type of tool to use to try to get that done. This price point is hard to get at just because it's hard with the development costs that go into a project such as this to be able to get a house built that cheap. That being said, you may feel that this should be a private sector function, but there is justification for why you could be looking at it. If you're going to, my recommendation, if you're going to look at using a TIF rebate for a project such as this, it is primarily because you're hitting at that price point, and it should be specifically because of that. But with that being said, I'll turn it over to the developer to let him go through his presentation, and then you can have some of your thoughts in regards to the pros and cons of this.
So we're talking about a TIF rebate, and then, let's say I go out and build a house out there, then do I get to go with the tax abatement?
Nope, this would be instead of that. There is, the tax abatement schedule is typically a 3-year 100% or a sliding scale for 10 years,
Yeah.
which works out to about the equivalent of 4 years.
Yeah, it's about 410% or so, 420.
A TIF rebate, as a matter of perspective, on this 11-year schedule where the developer can only capture a little over 60% of it, is probably going to be about 6 years. I didn't try to figure that out, but it's going to be in that 6-year amount of abatement that he's going to be specifically able to capture. So there is more that's captured. The bigger piece is it goes to the developer to try to bring down the original purchase price, as opposed to being turned over to the individual homeowner as an incentive towards reduced property taxes over time. They both, in the long run, are designed to try to get a homeowner into a property with a little bit lower cost, given that this is a higher assessed value than what our average properties are in town. The difference is that you're putting this over trying to spur the development to occur in the first place.
But the advantage is then we also accumulate some money for the low income.
Correct. That other 38.2% that's generated, the 400 and some thousand that'll be set aside, will be able to be, you've used this for what types of projects, Eric?
We've used it for grant matches in the past for CDBG owner-occupied rehabs. We've used it for a roofing program for income-qualified individuals to rehab their roof, siding windows. You can do things with home efficiencies or upgrading HVAC heating units. So
We'd have to come up with some type of program along those lines.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, guys. Well, good afternoon. My name's Ryan Nagraki with Midwest Realty Group. Appreciate your time again today. We've been kind of going through a lot of this since last fall there. So, as I stated, we're here for urban renewal request. Fast overview real quick. Again, Deer Point Estates. It's a 34-lot subdivision out by the airport, just south of Kessler Street. It's off Summer Street and South 14th Street. Some things that will be in the subdivision. We will have covenants for these homes that are put in, just to ensure quality homes are built, consistency throughout the neighborhoods to the north on Sioux Street, Kessler Street, and such. We will be selling these lots to local builders that will encourage job growth and sales tax growth from local building materials that would be purchased locally. With this as well, it'll potentially open up additional land for future development. So South 14th Street over here would be extended for city use for development to the east. And then there'll be a road over here all the way through on the south side that would open up this land to the south someday for future development as well. Our goal is to try to break ground here this spring yet. As Jim mentioned earlier, last spring, Gruen did a housing study. And within that housing study, several items that they noted, but if more residential development here in the county is not facilitated, then downward housing filtration, meaning prices and such, could continue on the decline. A third of our housing here in Burlington is 75 years or older, so when we have a housing stock that's that old with a median value of $76,000, it's kind of hard to continue to grow that tax base for the city. That housing study showed a tight supply of homes in the 180 to 260 range, with only estimated excess surplus of 4 units forecasted out to 2025. Currently, I've got a chart I'll go over on both these items, and then it's not feasible right now to build housing as the cost of land and the development improvements don't allow for housing to be priced below that $270,000. This here's a chart kind of showing that was in that housing study last spring that they did, showing the different price ranges of homes and the different units that would be demanded. On that study, they found that 77% of residents in Des Moines County could afford to purchase a home no higher than $260,000, and then that price point of the 180 to 260 showing that tight surplus of only 4 homes. This here's another chart that I took out of the housing study. This kind of goes over an example of what a 1,500 square foot home would cost based on here in Burlington. That 1,500 square foot home, the land and the site improvements, for that would be about $20 a square foot, so roughly $30,000 for development cost on that particular scenario. Your hard costs, your soft, and your financing expense at about $140 a square foot. Your builder's overhead and profit at $18 a square foot, so your total's about $178. So as you see, those total costs come in about $265,000 to $270,000. So to get housing underneath that price point, it's difficult because of those development expenses. This here, I'm showing you basically what my estimates are for the Deer Point Estates subdivision. I apologize, it's not a little bit bigger for you to read, but this chart basically shows the estimates I've received for excavation, sewers, storm sewer, the streets, curb, gutter, utilities, and the engineering and such. What it shows down here is my lot cost for the 34 lots. Per lot is $35,815 per lot, or my total investment for this subdivision would be $1.2 million, a little over that $1.2 million. And that's just as it was bid currently, and I think we all know if we get into projects that we have things that pop up that cost overruns. And so I've kind of priced in to show that if I have, say, 7% cost overruns, you know, my per lot cost then is $38,000. So some challenges that I'm looking at facing on this project, based on that housing study and kind of some of my own research, suggests that land costs are typically 10 to 15% of the sales price of a home. So that would include the utilities, your road, sewer, other site improvements. So your lot costs would range anywhere from the high 20s up to 50 to 60,000 for your lots in your most higher desirable locations. So again, my cost on a per lot, just as it was bid, is $35,815. So if you go back to that 10 to 15% range, if I just marked up my lot prices by 10%, that would encourage housing to be developed here from 262 to 394,000. And going back to that housing study, Approximately 77% of the units here in Burlington could not be priced more than $260 based on what the folks here in Des Moines County could afford. So that would be above that. So the reason we're here today, I am here to request approval for an urban renewal area for the Deer Point Estates subdivision to create a diversified, well-balanced local economy by creating new residential development, job opportunities, and strengthen that property tax base for the city of Burlington. Request to enter into what would be considered a developer agreement that Eric mentioned here earlier. And I think we all kind of have a good idea of what TIF is, but defined as the ability to capture and use most of the increased local property tax revenues from this development within the geographic area for a period of time. So it would be just within my subdivision that I develop, and then whatever incremental value that I increase that by would be rebated back to me over that period of 10 years. This request obviously positively affects the feasibility of this project. And as Jim had mentioned earlier, it kind of incentivizes me somewhat to try to develop that as quickly as possible as well. So something I want to point out too is that there's very minimal financial risk to the city because the city is not taking on that debt. I know it shows that the city has to show that, but I'm the one borrowing that money, taking that upfront cost, and so that risk really lies on me. This is kind of the net effect. So if you ask, okay, well, what does this mean to me? So as I mentioned, my development costs are a little over that 1.2 million. So to develop land, you're going to have operating expenses in any business. You're going to have carrying costs in any business. So those are estimated about $450,000. So my total investment would be 1.66 million roughly for this subdivision. The estimated TIF rebate that's in your developer agreement and such there that you guys have is about $836,000. That's a best case scenario for me. I envision that to be about $6 million, but the net investment then to me would be about $831,000. And then from an assessed value standpoint, currently this land is assessed at $32,100. My estimate, fully developed, if 34 homes out there averaged an assessment of $220,000, the new assessed area of this development would be a little over $7.4 million. There we go. Several years ago, the city did a comprehensive plan. You guys completed that, and it stated to evaluate new incentives to remain effective in promoting new housing development. In that comprehensive plan, it also said to remain competitive with surrounding communities and what they have to offer. There are several communities around us that are using urban renewal TIF for housing. For instance, Mediapolis, there's a subdivision up there currently that's using it for housing development. It's gone very well. Fort Madison currently has a project they're doing. It's gone very well for Fort Madison. And Mount Pleasant as well is using TIF rebate for residential development. It's working very well for them as well. And another reason, is to provide incentives for roadway and utility extension. So as I mentioned, I would bear that cost to extending South 14th Street and then that other southern road and the sewer extensions and such for the subdivision.
Ryan, can you go back one slide for a minute, please?
Yep. I've got a copy of this too. I can give you when we're done.
No, it's okay. I got it.
Do you have a question?
But
No.
I'd love to have a copy of that, though.
Yep.
Just whenever you get to me.
Yep. That work?
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. Last summer, I believe it was this council here, you guys did a goal-setting report last summer. You guys publicly supported the housing study, and that identified future housing needs that was done. In that in that goal planning session, you guys noted future opportunity with increased availability and flexibility of TIF funds. You saw an opportunity and somewhat of a concern for new housing development needs, housing shortage, lack of housing at all levels, and lack of new affordable housing. You did note in that high infrastructure costs for new development increases cost and therefore does affect the sales price. And the city has ongoing commitments that were noted to continue helping with economic development programs, and also noted to consider significant new programs, to consider initiatives for housing in the 150 to 250 price range. And you noted also, again, incentives for roadway and utility extensions to open up new areas for new development. So what are some of the benefits to the city of Burlington? As I mentioned, that South 14th Street extension for development for the future. There will be a right-of-way agreement that I have obtained from the landowner to the east that I would be holding an escrow that would be in benefit to the city for future growth in that area. Increased property assessed valuations, increased tax revenue to the city. There's going to be permit income, fee income, utility, sewer, water income. It creates housing where there's a shown demand. This will help with economic development growth for Burlington. It helps with employer attraction and retention, and also meets all the goals that you guys had kind of outlined in that goal planning session, what the housing study showed, and the city's comprehensive plan that was done several years ago as well. From a community support standpoint, I have received several letters of support from people in town. Letter of support from Jason Hutchinson with the Greater Burlington Partnership, supporting housing in this price point. Various realtors I've talked with here in town support new housing in the price point. A local recruiter here in town for the hospital supports the project as it helps him bring in new employees to Burlington. I've talked to a lot of builders already that have a pretty strong interest, because right now they're building, you know, in Middletown or Mediapolis, because there's nothing here for builders to build on as well. So something I believe in, and I was born and raised here in town, is giving back to the community. And so currently, understanding the importance of education. So currently I'm working on a partnership with the Burlington School District, the West Burlington School District, and the college to partner with their trades programs. So something that this will help educate our youth and our future workforce with all these local school districts kicking in. So what I will do is I will provide several lots, probably 4 of these lots, to the schools and the materials at cost. The students, the faculty, and my contractor, they would come in, they would build the homes on these lots, and they gain real-world experience, gets them out in the field, out of the classroom, and then when that house is completed and we sell it, I'm going to donate 50% of those net proceeds back to the schools into that trades program so they can continue to grow that. I think we all know that tools and equipment for the construction industry is rather expensive, so trying to donate some of that money back so we can keep growing that. And you know, I know we've got a local business owner here. Some of the skilled trades in town are hard to find sometimes, so hopefully getting that education early in the students, we can keep them here and to help grow that. So, and so with that, just to close, you know, I've been working on this project since well, last July probably, I think, when I first talked with Jim, and got everybody around the table from Public Works, the Water Department, Streets, Sewers, Fire Department, Police Department. So it's been fun. I've enjoyed working with everybody here at the city on the project, and it's went really well. Also, just want to close and say that, you know, there's a lot of other communities out there that are doing this exact thing, and it's working for them. And it's working, they're partnering with the schools as well, and it's working for them, giving that education to the kids too. So, excuse me, I just hope I have your guys' support and to help see this project to fruition here this spring. So, thanks for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are you going to do any of the building yourself? Building any of the
Sweet.
homes?
We've got currently, everything's pending approval of this, but I've got 9 lots now actually pre-sold to local builders. And then I do have 2 gentlemen that I'm looking at working with on building out some of the homes. We don't have the capacity to build all of them. Out of the 34, we'd probably look to build maybe about 10 to 15 of them.
You mentioned earlier that in your presentations that you were going to do the first 18 lots or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so it'll be broke up into 2 phases. Let me see here. If I go back, it'll be, the first phase will be 25 lots. So it'll be lots 1 through 25. What it'll provide me out of the gate is an access point. I wasn't gonna do 25 from the beginning. I was gonna stop here. But I had to provide letter of credit and bonding to the city that would guarantee this portion to go back to Summer Street later. Well, that cost to me was significant enough that I said, all right, I'm gonna finish this Summer Street, so we'll have, right out of the gate, we'll have access from Summer Street and South 14th. So all these lots here and here will be developed on the first phase. And then the remainder lots, 26 through 34, would be on the second phase.
Does that create 2 separate TIF periods, or?
You know, Eric, I know we've sent information to Bob, but was he looking to draw it up as having 2 set time frames,
He's
or?
looking at that option, yeah. I haven't gotten information back, but he's looking at that option to do that.
Because he did have a request to try to fully capture the value, to have that put into 2 pieces, which would have a staggering of when those started. That was something that Fort Madison at least has done with one of their subdivisions, allowed that staggering within it. The council could have a determination that you're willing to work, if you ultimately do have a desire and willingness to work on a TIF rebate, you could say you're willing to do that, but not have a staggering of that. That may put some crimps on the developer, but that certainly is part of that discussion, that you may want to have a limitation there. But yes, he's asking specifically that your
I
second
think I did
phase.
see language in there that showed it as Project 1, Project 2, or something like that, I believe.
Yep.
We've got an awful lot of development, housing development going in town right now. And they're all different price points. Many of them being higher price points. Like Zeisers off of Sunnyside, Pearson's off of Gear, Myers off of Mason. Sunrise West is starting another phase of their development. Mike Hoffman on Mount Pleasant Street is doing his. Of course, we got the Tama building on Jefferson Street. Going to bring in another 44 housing units. Scott Peck and Bob Huppenbauer off of 14th Street. They just about finished that one up. The McConnell Lofts in the downtown, that's a rather huge project and not really moving along very well. That's on 400 Valley. Lloyd Thola is absolutely everywhere in every nook and cranny in Burlington. He is building new homes and redeveloping old homes, and many of his homes are in that 180 to 275 range. Steve Zager off Florence, I went back there today. There's one property developed, he's got 12 more yet to go. I didn't see any sold signs up. Diamond Ridge Estates on Sunnyside still has 3 lots. And then in a conversation with Mike Pearson, he's got 45 acres that's already annexed into the city. It was annexed in several years ago that would be fitting for a TIF project as well, if that's the way the council wants to go with incentivizing development. I am a little concerned that we're wanting to incentivize further when we've got this much success going on right now in housing development. My other concern is in the affordable housing packet that the state puts together, the maximum value of a house to receive those tax credits, $200,000.
Cost, yeah.
Correct. What's the value, the average value is gonna be around 220,000?
That's what I envision is the average. I mean, you're gonna have some that'll be below that, and some that'll be above that, but yeah.
I'm a little concerned in that price range, that at the higher end of that, whether that's gonna meet that 200,000 cost limit, and what that's going to mean to the actual project itself, as far as having basements and that sort of thing built into the project. I mean, there's, I'm, to average out that 220,000, you're gonna have to have several of them in the 280,000, or 275, 280,000 price range. And for the developers to be able to capture that $15,000 tax credit is going to be difficult at that. I'm questioning whether that can be achieved.
So
and where, with the tax abatement incentive that we currently have that's been successful for us, isn't a better option for getting homes developed. Next question, what are you planning to sell the lots for?
So right now,
Development costs are gonna be around 35 and a half. What are you gonna sell?
right
the
now,
lots
I've got lots sold from pre-sold from 27 to 32. And the reason the difference in prices is based on quantity of lots being purchased by each individual.
what's your average, what do you think your average sell price per lot's going to be, and then potentially the potential total revenues off of that?
So my average, I've focused more on the first phase for the 25. I think that average is going to be that 30 to 32 price point. So, you know, it'd be about I think it was about 725,000 gross. What that means to me net, the TIF, with the TIF in there, net of operating expenses and everything would be, on that first phase from the land development, would be about $180,000 net profit on a $1.6 million investment. And on your, some of your comments, you know, the current developments that are in town, I think, are at those higher price points that are being done, that you referenced, you know, and some more condos, styles like that. The workforce housing tax credits, to qualify, the builder would have to purchase 4 lots from me, so that's where the $27,000 guy, he's buying 4 of them. And to get that, they have to keep their cost under 200, so, you know, that's why their sales prices will probably be that 220. If they're making about 10%, that's why I envision the people that enroll in that tax credit program, that keeping that, you know, at that 200 cap, that's why I envision that sales price around the 220. Some of them might, I've got one gentleman that's buying a lot for himself. He's got his own builder he's bringing in to build a house, and he envisions his house to be about 260. So that's just kind of the reason on those variances.
Is the cost of the lot figured into the total cost of the property when they're figuring that?
200 cap, yes, it is.
200
You
cap.
do have to include the cost of the lot, yep.
So you probably $170,000 and $200,000
Yep.
in materials.
Yep.
And then 5% back on that for the
Sales tax
sales
refund,
tax
yep,
refund.
yep. Yeah, what I envision that, what I've been kind of talking to a lot of builders with is that workforce tax program. I envision that actually incentivizes that builder for another 10% profit to them. So if they bought 4 lots, I've only got one guy that or 2 gentlemen, 1 partnership that are gonna do the 4. What I envision, if a builder makes 8 to 10% normally, that program, if they enroll all 4 lots into it, then that would around another 10% basically to them.
That's good for the builders.
There's a lot of the other subdivisions too, as you mentioned, it's good for builders. A lot of those other subdivisions you mentioned, the developer that developed those retains all those lots for themselves to build that out over time. Where this is kind of a mixed, you know, I'm selling the lots off to anybody in the community that would like to purchase those. I'm not retaining all those to build those out myself. So that's a little bit different too.
Any other questions?
Eric, some historical reference, the properties, the housing to the north of his supposed development, all those are probably, were they built with the 10-year or the 3-year? Do you have any concept of how that might work, or was there some incentive on that too?
North of there was in Pheasant Run TIF development.
It was TIF.
That was a TIF development as well,
Okay.
yep.
One of the things it had with it was and I didn't look at the documents, but it had a price cap that
Yeah.
you got to deal with. How did that work?
They didn't have as well monitoring. I think some of the they had a price cap of sale price, but some of the homes were sold without being completely finished and then finished later to maintain that. I think, obviously, Ryan and others, we'd want to make sure it's a home ready for occupancy at that sale price or that cap figure. So,
Yeah, in the past, I think how that was done was it was sold, but you had to pay to do your flooring after the sale. You know, there was things that kind of were done differently, and that's definitely not the way I was going to be doing this.
That was not a prouder moment.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
but that's something, with that cap, it would be a occupancy level cap of 275.
I
so.
assume that was not a TIF rebate project then, right? It was just a
Just
straight,
was
pure
an-
TIF.
do the streets and,
Yeah, it was an upfront TIF to fund the
We
infrastructure.
carried all the risk on that.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this is a
Yeah,
better.
the
better-
developers did have to pay the first couple of years. There wasn't enough increment
To make it,
to
yeah,
generate it, so they had to make up the difference.
okay.
We had a little bit of security there.
Okay.
Is everybody good?
This,
A lot of good information.
well, this isn't the only step along the way. One or two other pieces that need to be done besides this, Eric.
The urban renewal plan is one step, and then the adoption of the ordinance providing division of taxes has 2 meetings, and then at that second meeting, there could be at least 2 meetings, could be 3, and at the final meeting, there'd be a development agreement as well, so there's multiple steps through this.
Again, this is something that the council has to make a decision as we move through here, or if you're in favor of or not. As we've talked with Bob Jostin, the only thing that, I mean, I've never done a TIF rebate on housing. I've never done a TIF project for housing. It's not something that that I'm out actively trying to find. Our community has done one in the past, and it has gotten housing at a price point that you don't find many other projects like it in the community. So it did, even if it had some flaws with it, it did serve a purpose. That being said, if you are to do it, what makes sense to me for why you're doing it is for the price point, if you do move forward with it. If you're doing that within the development agreement, we talked to Bob Jostin about, I mean, given that our major incentive in here is to get housing that meets that 260,000
Right.
demand, the demand for housing below that, we want to make sure that if we're going to do a TIF rebate, it's specifically to hit that need. And we've talked with Ryan that if he's showing stuff up here that has a housing range from 100 to 180 to 275, well, if all of it's at 275, you're not hitting that 260 price range. So what do we need to have in there to make sure that he's actually doing that? Especially when he's selling some of those lots off, and having someone else build on them. We don't have control over what's going on there. He can have some level of control with as he's selling it, but he has to have a reason why he's having that level of control too. We talked with Bob about, do we have the ability to have that price cap on there, that you have to have all of the housing be below 260? Or is it 75% of the units need to be below that 260 in order to get the rebate back? We can tweak that a little bit depending on, I mean, if you are willing to do a TIF rebate and move through this process, we can tweak some of those caps in there to try to make sure that we're putting out a project that hits at the identified need. And those are going to be some of those details that we want to make sure are included in on the backside, and we've tried to let Ryan know that we need to have something in there that is a mechanism to ensure that it's hitting what the stated goal is. Again, if you don't pass this first ordinance or you end up failing it along the way, those back steps aren't going to come to the fore to be done, but they are going to have to be worked out if you do move through this process. And until we know where you're all at on it, it's going to be hard for any of us to know exactly what needs done. But there are several steps along the way.
Well, it seems to me like at the very beginning, when he came here and asked for voluntary annexation, he was up front saying that we need, in order for this to work. And it seemed to me like we were at least tacitly giving our approval to the project. All those details need to be worked out, and of course,
Right.
you wouldn't stand there and say that if that wasn't your intended goal, and so you can appreciate that.
One of those believers, let your handshake mean more than pen and papers.
I just, my biggest concern is what this will generate, and that is more people coming forward and asking to do TIF projects.
Yeah, right.
And it sets a precedent, and we're hearing from people today that are upset that we're giving a 3-year tax abatement. You know, they want, and we're incentivizing when we've already got some pretty decent development going on. Understandably, we don't have as many of the price points covered that in all of these, but some of them are. There are not all of these are high-end properties. I'm very concerned that, and I think once we open that spigot, we're not going to be able to turn it off, because we could be challenged legally on that. And I don't really think the last TIF project came about because we were desperate for housing. We needed some housing in this community, and I mean desperately. And that it was kind of a last-ditch effort to make it happen. And the powers that be fudged on that project to get it to happen, to make it work. I just don't want to see us get into something that we can't get ourselves out of in the future.
I respect that, Tim. I think my other comment would be too, though, there's a few houses that are being built maybe in that price point, 1 or 2 here, 1 or 2 here. But on this scale, you know, to try to hit that price point on this scale, you know, there's nobody doing it, and nobody's able to do it based on the economics and what the housing study said. And, you know, you guys kind of said in that goal planning session last summer that you were willing to consider the flexibility of TIF and TIF funds and housing initiatives in that 150 to 250. So, yeah.
Well, in all due respect, the TIF for housing has been talked down by the council and staff for many, many years because of the basically the unsuccess stories that we have to tell about it, and that the flexibility of the TIF that we were discussing in the goal-setting session wasn't necessarily dealing with housing. It was more dealing with infrastructure. And the other note, and this is no reflection on you at all, but the process that we've followed on this has left me confused. You know, we were voting on an annexation, but we were seeing a presentation on a development. And I didn't know when to speak out about the development, and you know, because the focus in the vote was about the annexation, and the rest of it wasn't on the agenda, and we're not supposed to talk about things that aren't on the agenda. We could present them, but we're not supposed to talk about them, and that's why, that's where my confusion was at.
Yeah.
So
I just like to be open and upfront, and figured
I
that's
appreciate
the,
that.
So what happens to your
You've done a
development?
tremendous job so far.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
I'm not saying it's dead, but
what happens to your concept if this doesn't go?
I've really got to kind of take a step back, you know, and you know, I've got 9 people that I've got lots possibly pre-sold to that I've got to go back to them and have a conversation that, hey, look, I've shown them that development cost chart showing my expense of $35,815. So I'd have to go back to the drawing board and see if any of them are willing to step up and purchase a lot, you know, at $40,000. If not, then I have to consider, okay, do I stand back and visit with my contractor? Is this something that we tackle ourselves? You know, and then back off on the phasing, you know, do it in smaller steps. So it's just, there's a lot more risk to it, you know, and,
Sure.
and,
Well, I think it's well established that there's a need for this price category. I don't think there's any question about that. I've heard about that from many people. So I think I'm very interested in this because of that need. I mean, now where we go from there, I don't know, but
Pray for wisdom.
All right, I'll have to hope everybody's wise by Monday. Are you
Well,
good?
Yeah, I am good, but basically with the rebate, it's set up to where, from my understanding, the risk isn't on us. It's like we're not upfronting the money.
correct.
So I think that's another good thing to keep in mind when, you know, we have this gentleman in front of us who has this very well thought out plan and has been upfront with us and everyone who he possibly can get in contact with, which I find amazing. You don't see that. I haven't seen that since I've sat here. And I think it'll be a great addition to the community. I hope we can figure out a way to make it happen and make it so where it doesn't get us in a situation later on with somebody else. I think that is an important, we don't want everyone coming up and thinking that they
Get carte
deserve that, I guess. I don't know. If we
That's an
can
issue.
go about it in a way, you know, do we trust you enough, or are you deserving enough for that kind of a trust?
It's gonna come down, do we need it? You know, how bad do we want to see this go through? I wanna make sure everybody's got what they need to say, questions, all
Right.
questions asked.
Good,
Thank you, Ryan.
thank you.
Appreciate your
you.
time,
This guy's
guys.
not invisible. He will be available for questions, I can assure everyone.
Thanks, guys, appreciate your time.
All right, thank you, Ryan, appreciate it. I'll read number 4, I don't know if you need to, number 4 is a motion for preliminary adoption of the first reading of an ordinance providing for the division of taxes levied on taxable property in the Deer Point Estate Urban Renewal Plan, Urban Renewal Area pursuant to section 403.19 of Code of Iowa. Do we need to touch on that, or?
Just a continuation of the process that allows for the use of TIF funds for this.
You guys good? It's tied
Yep.
with 3? Okay.
Move on.
Okay, number 5 will be this is the motion for preliminary adoption of the second reading of an ordinance vacating and selling a portion of Ganon Street and Whitaker Street right-of-ways, thank you, sir, adjacent to the property located at 1104 Ganon Street, Burlington, Iowa. Mr. Tislin?
No changes on this since the previous reading. Again, Mark Brockway, Brockway Company requesting to vacate portions of Ganon and Whitaker in which they own all adjacent property to the site, or adjacent to the site, other than the railroad there to the west. Looking to, I guess, maintain their property, allow better access for them, and also potentially secure the property through the use of a gate and a Knox lock on the gate. This went to the planning commission. They voted 5-0 to recommend vacating the right-of-way.
That makes a lot of sense too. I drove
You
over
guys,
there.
right on. It's a second reading. Do you guys have any problem bumping that one?
I don't,
No, I think,
I'm good.
let's go ahead.
I'm good.
Okay.
Wait till he gets back so he knows that.
Let's see, we'll catch him up.
He has to
Hey,
write.
we're going to, just so you know, we're going to, number 5, we're going to bump past the second reading on that. Well done. Number 6 is a motion for preliminary adoption of the second reading on this one as well, of an ordinance vacating and selling the alley running from Columbia Street to Washington Street between Front Street and Main Street, Burlington, Iowa. Mr. Tisland.
Similar situation.
That's a good move too.
All property owned by Jennison Industries or subsidiaries. They're looking to tie this alley to the property to the east, expand the kitchen for the Drake Restaurant. No, this went to the planning commission again. They voted 5-0 to recommend approval as well.
Right on. Do you guys have any problem with bumping that one as well?
No, not at all.
No.
We're good? Tim, you okay with that? Okay, good deal. Number 7 is a resolution awarding contract for the 2016 West Avenue and West Burlington Avenue Roundabout Rise Project, RM-0977, 643-7D-29.
All right, so since the person who's supposed to be doing this isn't here,
He isn't there.
I wasn't thinking about that.
We have a representative here.
We have a representative from
The
property
mountain man is
maintenance
here.
who might not want to get into that.
Mountain is here.
I gotta get down to,
They do have a presentation on a portion of this as well for
You do?
slides that we can at least show.
do you want to go through them without talking about them? Because I'm certainly not going to talk about his presentation. He had a family issue come up out in Nebraska, so the end of last week, and he's not back. And have you heard when he was planning on being able to be back? So, we had 4 bids that came in for the roundabout. The resolution for approval of moving forward on that would be based on the low bid that was received out of the 4 projects, with Mike Nelson Concrete Paving at the $961,614.98. We had about you see the other 4 bid, or other 3 bids were included back behind it, but Public Works does recommend moving forward with Mike Nelson at that low bid. If you see the funding that we had set aside towards this project, we'd had when we originally submitted the grant application, we'd had an estimate of just over $1 million. As our engineering department was putting together the estimates to go out to bid a little over a year later, that preliminary number went up to 1.35 million. So when we got a number that came back at 961,000, which was below what was within our RISE grant application, we were very happy to
Yes.
see that number. Again, it's a project where 80%, I think, of the RISE projects are state funded. The other 20% is our local match on it. Subject to this being approved, they're looking to get this, moving forward here very quickly. Nick is trying to find as many ways as possible to try to get information out in regards to roundabouts over the course of the next few months. He's talked about different ways of maybe doing a demonstration project just to get people more comfortable with it as we move through this process. It's going to be a significant
Learning process.
Yeah,
for
it
everyone
is.
within the
It
community.
is.
And I think that's about as much as I can cover.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
What
for
else
Jim?
did you have up there, Eric?
He had a map showing the detour route with the roundabout there on the red, and then access off of Division to get back to Gear Avenue.
So as you see this map, this is an issue that is one of the other agenda items for temporary signalization. And it has to do with the process of what's going to happen as we move into construction. And not just with this project, but later in the summer, we'll be doing the
Pleasant.
Agency Street west of Roosevelt Avenue that will be impacting in this area. We already have significant traffic counts on Division Street, and there is a level of concern. Were you going to address that? Go ahead and stand up.
Council. What we have is a concern for the increase in traffic because of
I'm sorry, can I have you say your name, Braden?
Braden Hill, property maintenance. Our concern is the increase in traffic that's going to be at Division and West Burlington Avenue. And we've come up with several ideas. One of them is a proposal. We already have westbound traffic with a straight through and a left turn lane that's already on the pavement. What we would request on the next one is to do that for eastbound also. We have the lane size for it. We'd like to propose this as a temporary to curtail and move traffic a little bit further. And as we monitor it, we would like to possibly propose to have it stay permanently at that intersection. We have also looked into temporary signals, and that would be kind of a last resort to help move traffic through. We had a cost on the next one for low side of 23.7 in that area. And looking at that, we were also thinking that maybe we take the equipment from West Avenue and West Burlington Avenue, if that became an issue, and moved it down there to use that $25,000 on that, since we already own a very good portion of the equipment that would go into it. But that's an option we're looking at after we do the left turn for eastbound. And at this point, we really think that will help traffic, but we will monitor it. So what we would look for is just your approval to do the temporary left turn. We're looking at approximately $500 in material and 16 man-hours to change and put the left turn in.
Good.
Jesse was supposed to be here for this. So I can let him come up too, and if he has any input in regards to what you see for what you're trying to do for public education on making this work.
Yeah. So specifically for public education, we've got a website built. We have like a one-page explanation of how to navigate a roundabout, the different rules for it. I don't have that for you tonight, but we can definitely get that for you.
Cool.
And you could check it out on the website. I don't know that the directional thing is posted quite yet, but it's coming probably later this week. And then I don't know if we were going to do, we kind of talked about a couple informational meetings at the library for anybody that wanted to come and voice their opinion, or if anybody had any things they wanted to comment on at that time too.
That's about the roundabout?
Yeah, yeah. So,
Any other questions for Jesse?
No, but I'm looking forward to that. I drive through there several times a week. And so it's,
Me
like
too.
Friday when I went through there was a long backup of people waiting to turn onto Division from West Burlington going north, so.
How long will this project take, the roundabout?
we have, I believe, 75 working days for this one.
75 working days.
Yes, so 10 weeks. thereabouts, 11.
Any other questions for Jesse? Thanks for coming down, man.
Sorry about that, guy.
Okay. Next, number 8 is a resolution adopting the personnel manual for non-union employees.
Hello.
Hi,
So we do this annually. This manual is effective July 1st, 2017, and so we update it once a year. There wasn't a lot of changes to it this year. I'll just flip to page 2, is where we talk about the salary adjustments, and again, it describes the new compensation plan and study that we had done last year and implemented, so it just explains how that is structured. And then the salary adjustments in this proposed manual is a 2.25% increase, which matches what the union contracts all agreed on. All of them were the same. And also that transition table. Again, that transition table goes with the salary schedule if you currently are making below the midpoint of the salary of your range. You could possibly, depending on how long you're there, you'd get a higher increase to get you to that midpoint faster. And then once you hit the midpoint, you would just get the 2.25%. And the other change is the insurance article, which is Article 7 on page 9. This just describes how we do our health insurance. And this is stating that the employees will contribute 4% of the cost of single or family coverage, and that not to exceed 30 for single and 60 for family per month. And that's the other change in here, which again is the same as the union contracts.
That's
Any
good.
questions? Or?
Thank you, Steph.
Pretty straightforward, thank you.
I saw a lady that looked just like you with some kids this weekend.
Yep, that was me.
Okay. Next, we have a resolution approving final acceptance, final payment, and release of retention monies for the 2015 Burlington wastewater treatment facility built filter press room modifications.
Done.
Don is here.
Yay.
This final payment has been a long time coming. It's been a long, drawn-out process. You had before you a resolution to approve for final payment, paperwork from HR Green indicating that the unit that we currently have in place does meet the project specifications and performance requirements. You also have a copy of the pay application that they were looking for in closing out the project at 100%. We had some issues with the original unit that was installed. It was not due to the work performance of the contractor, but his supplier.
Okay.
The unit itself did not meet specifications. In your resolution, you'll notice that there is a recommendation for the final payment of $4,000, $4,108.75, which would leave a retention of 5% retention for the entire project of $9,341.75. I'm also assessing a liquidated damages of 15 days at $250 per day in accordance with contract language of $3,750, making the final retainage that would be approved and under this resolution and released, I believe it's 30 days after acceptance, of $5,591.75. Any questions? The unit that we have installed now is the second unit, and it is, as I said, met performance and design requirements. It's performing as intended.
Okay.
So you're feeling good, Don?
Yep.
That's good. Any other questions?
For me.
Thank you, Don.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is a resolution approving demolition nuisance abatements for various properties.
We have a lot of nuisances.
Yeah, yes, we do.
Too many.
Handle that. You guys okay? All right, number 3 is a resolution approving and this will be moved to the regular agenda, is a resolution approving the mayor's participation in Fireball Run and authorizing the expenditure of funds to participate.
What are the funds?
I put a copy for each of you for what the registration fees were that the chamber paid. This was a question that came up actually from the paper asking, so what's going on with the mayor participating in this? Who's paying for that?
Thanks, Tanner.
Actually, that was a good question, because I'm like, I hadn't even thought of that. The part of the Fireball Run package, as they came and talked to us as a community, they mentioned that each host community was going to be allowed to have a team on this. Well, all those negotiations were done by the chamber, and they registered the team and asked if the mayor would participate. No one ever talked about costs. It needs talked about. The registration fee for a team to participate was, they registered at the early timeline, which I think was $9,500. I think it was $9,500, but I'm trying to find it now. Yeah, $9,500, plus $1,600 for a second member, and another $85 for a second shirt. Total package for the 2 people who would be participating. The CEO participant is Chad Palmer, and the requested community member was the mayor. Total cost for those 3 items was, what, $11,185. If you're, for the mayor to participate, half of that cost would be a benefit. You can't have a benefit, so if he's going to participate, the city needs to cover that cost. What we know for what actual costs are that are going to be there are those identified numbers. Be about $5,600 for the city. The resolution I wrote, or asked Kathleen to write, because I certainly didn't write it, to have it be able to be up to $7,500 in case there were other costs that were incurred, and I'd want the resolution to be able to accommodate that. But this is up to the council. Is this something that you feel is a worthwhile promotion of the city to have the mayor involved in this activity? This is representing the city, and it ends up being a significant promotion of our community, but this cost doesn't necessarily have to be there. However, if he's not the one who's representing, there's something lost for the community's representation in it.
I think the mayor being one of the representatives makes a lot of sense, though. I mean,
It's what they'd like to see,
Yeah.
actually. The Fireball Run likes to see it be that, but if you notice the materials here for the community representatives, it mentions they're looking for somebody from either an elected official, somebody from economic development, some community-oriented group to be that other representative, because they're trying to get that flavor. They want to get a true community flavor within their show mix. But this is certainly up to the council if you want to do this. The fee to cover, or how you would cover this, council does have a budget area. You have an item that's line itemed out for travel. For example, last year when our region won the Big Muddy Cup, the mayor did attend the award ceremony down in
Natchez,
Mississippi, which cost, I don't know, $2,500 or somewhere in that neighborhood, I'm going to guess, for airline and rooms and et cetera. There is not quite enough in the travel area specifically to cover this amount. However, within the full council budget, that if you were to authorize it, this would fit right at your budgeted amount for council overall.
well, I, for one, am very much in favor of the mayor being our representative.
You said no one else could pay for this, it has to come out of the city budget?
That was going to be my question.
you like to address that? Because this is a question I had to ask the city attorney to make sure I understood.
Pat O'Connell, city attorney. The only thing, our main concern was that we not have a restricted donor provide the amount of money due to the fact that chamber does fall squarely in that definition. And we felt it would be best just to have the council fund it. We don't have any questions then. We don't have anybody accusing us of, the mayor receiving a personal benefit or the mayor's purpose in doing it would be to promote the city, but of course, anyone could accuse him of, obtaining a personal benefit, a cash amount basically is what it is, that he would ordinarily have to pay that a restricted donor would be providing for him. And so when the city manager and I talked about it, that was what we were concerned about. So to answer your question, Councilmember Scott, I mean, theoretically, there could be somebody out there that would put the money up that would not in any way, shape, or form be a restricted donor, would have absolutely zero contact with the city of Burlington or with Mayor McCampbell at all, but I don't know who that person would be. And I don't know, right now, the only entity out there that could offer such a thing is the chamber, and they definitely would be, I think that would be problematic. Just due to the fact that they have matters before this council all the time, including Mayor McCampbell, who's actually a voting member of the council. So.
But there could be a community fundraising project, say 100 people give $50 a person.
What, to pay back the city?
And donate it to the city to pay his expenses. Would that be appropriate?
Theoretically, each one of those individuals would have to be examined, I suppose, to determine whether they are, whether 68B of the Iowa Code, would define them as someone who's prohibited from giving that kind of a donation to an elected official.
Well, I wonder if the chamber shouldn't be asked.
They can't.
No? Huh?
That was the initial idea, actually.
Like,
That's the dollar amount that we can get, according to the code, the $2.99.
Yeah, it's less than $3, de minimis.
I'm gonna live in that.
This is a little over the $3.
What about a anonymous? Is that, I'm just throwing other things out there since we.
These are all issues that you have to be careful
Right.
of as an elected official.
Yeah.
You have friends who buy you lunch, but you have to be careful about having someone who would potentially have business with the city.
But I guess if we didn't
doing
know,
such.
somebody dropped a check off, mailed a check in. I'm just, in case anybody wants to know.
this whole event's going through the Convention and Visitors Bureau, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. And Convention and Visitors Bureau hands out roughly $17,000 annually to community events. And is this not considered a community event?
But it's coming out of our
But-
budget, so it would.
No, I'm not.
Yeah,
The specific thing is that you have the mayor participating, and with the mayor participating, he gets a personal value out of that.
right. That's the problem. I mean, they can fund events all day long.
I don't understand
They
that.
certainly can.
The way the Iowa law is written. Not every state has something like that, but Iowa certainly does.
Really?
So if we go out to Washington DC and they pay for our trip to go out there, that's not a personal benefit for,
If we go out to DC, like when the chamber does the DC trip, it's the same as when they do the Southeast Iowa Days up in Des Moines. The city pays the registration fees for whoever's going.
And that's perfectly
Correct.
legal. The city can fund its own elected representatives to participate in things like this to promote the city all day long. But
Shouldn't that
the
then,
main problem is, it's just like, it's no different than the Iowa legislature. If a lobbyist is in Des Moines and the lobbyist approaches someone and says, here, I'm going to give you something for free that would promote that politician,
That makes sense to me.
you can see where the appearance of, and there's an appearance of impropriety also. I don't think there is any. I'm sure Mayor McCampbell's motives here are
There's no
perfectly
impropriety.
pure.
I never even heard of Fireball
Yeah.
Run until this
Right.
thing went down, so,
Right.
this is gonna be 8 days of me working if I do it, it's not
Right.
gonna be me having fun and just goofing off. But,
well, if we're looking for a place to pay for this, shouldn't that come from Economic Development Fund, since that's the intended purpose of the Fireball Run?
I wouldn't do that. If you were looking for somewhere other than the general fund, you could use hotel motel tax as promotion for the community, which this certainly is.
That's
But
what it is.
I think that realistically, you have the ability to fund it within the city council budget. It doesn't put you out of line with where that budget is. It puts you up at the max, what the full amount is
For the year?
for the year, but you certainly are within it.
I mean, I'm not on the committee or anything, but to me, this is supposed to be a special thing. I mean, not just any town gets this honor, and it's gonna be a great promotional thing for our city. I mean,
That's the idea.
Well, I'm not gonna be saying anything about this, so, are you
You know,
guys satisfied with it? Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and the mayor didn't ask for this. I mean, this is their normal approach, I think, if they can get, they'd love to have the mayor of the city involved, which makes so much sense to me. I mean, and then if they can get a local businessman, you know, it's.
Well, I'll tell you up front, I can't support putting tax dollars into this, but I support the mayor going. I'll start the fund off with $100.
He's trying to get me arrested already.
If
The
we-
attorney's sitting right there, Tim.
I'm saying.
I'm just messing with you.
We can set up a jar and people can come in and throw cash in it all day long and it doesn't have to be, it's anonymous donation. It's the same thing you do when you're running for election. You can put a jar out and people can put all the money they want into that jar.
You know,
Could I ask you to do some research? Talk to your counterparts in Dubuque and Fort Dodge and see how they're doing it.
I think regardless of how they're doing it, this is the route that you're supposed to be doing this. That be correct?
What?
If you're, either the city pays for it or the mayor himself personally pays for participation. If you're gonna, would that be your recommendation?
And I could, if you want, I could reduce my previous email correspondence to you, which is fairly detailed, into a memo to the council, and that could be disseminated as well.
But it's not gonna be a matter of what
That
the
would,
other.
it explains it fairly well.
I don't think it's gonna be a matter of what the other communities do is, because they may or may not, I don't know where they are with their thinking on it, but this is more of an issue of a legal interpretation of what you should be doing.
So
as a
basically, you're saying
policy.
the only way that we can do this is if the council pays for him to go. Is that what you're saying?
Right, or he could, but
it's not happening.
it would be,
I do want to say this, though, just to throw out, well, no, I'm not.
interestingly, they could promote the event, they can pay for an event, they can do all sorts of things, and they can even ask public officials to come to events, and they can do that all day long, and they can fund public amenities in town, they can do all sorts of things like that that don't directly benefit individual elected officials who have the power to pass ordinances to assist individuals. So the individuals that are coming before you asking for that are the ones that can't donate directly to you individually. That's where the problem lies. It's not really, the chamber can fund and promote and do all kinds of things to promote the event. That's not the problem. The problem is if any one of you is asked to be the person driving and they say, here, I'll tell you what, I'll help you out. I will pay your entry fee for you. That's when we start to have a problem.
Yeah.
Because, and if you, maybe another way to think about it would be, you think you're doing your civic duty, and that's all Mayor McCampbell's trying to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean a political opponent of his would view it that way. You can imagine where the ethics issues start to come in and why the legislature wrote it the way it did. They don't want the appearance of a politician gaining that benefit free of charge and, participating in that. I think the council to which he belongs can fund that, which it's perfectly fine to do. We're promoting the community, that's our reason.
Yeah, that's the only reason.
And we're certainly not doing any favors for any individual out there, anyone at the chamber or anything by having Mayor McCampbell do it. All we're doing is promoting the city and allowing Mayor McCampbell to assist us in doing that, which that's right above board and there's no issue with that under the legislature's law that this is what we deal with, so.
I'm in favor of the city paying for it, let's go on, that's my feeling.
So what's the benefit of this event? And, how do we, what do we see from it?
Well, I think we ought to invite somebody down that's just putting this all together and let them tell us what it is. I mean, I'm not on the committee, I don't know, but all I know
It would
is,
probably be nice to have Chelsea come down and
Yeah.
talk about it. Again,
That'd be
when
great.
when I said yes to do Fireball Run, I said yes, not knowing that there was gonna be any money that was gonna be needed or anything. I thought everything was already squared away. So, you know, I said, yeah, that I would do it. I didn't know that there was gonna be drama along with it. I was just hoping
Right,
that,
I know,
that's what they want me to do, then I'm all in. As long as I'm sitting in this chair, I'll do just about anything, as long as it doesn't offend my savior. But, yeah, I certainly didn't know that.
all right.
Are we ready to move
I
them for
am
now?
on that committee now, Mr. Fleming.
Oh, you are,
Yeah,
aren't you?
so-
Oh, that's right.
But having Chelsea would be a good idea.
They
I think
fired
so,
me.
too. I think so, too.
When do we have to make this decision?
Don't have any timeline.
It's no big rush.
You just got to make sure that they know who they're promoting, who the
Yeah, they already
local
got
representatives
a
are.
poster cut out, so I'm sure that they would like to get the actual right person, whoever's gonna go on that, so.
Yeah, there's a life-size Mayor McCampbell around there in his,
I know.
in his
Chelsea-
fireproof driving suit.
Chelsea tells me every time I walk into my office, I'm freaked out. So how do you think I feel? I gotta look in the mirror every morning. So,
Just, it does say all requirements must be completed before June 1st, 2017. I'm assuming that includes the.
Yeah.
it also says, I will say this before we move on, Mayor Pro Tem pointed this out. It says, those unable to obtain physical approval or diagnosed with the following conditions are ineligible: seizures, heart problems, dementia, cardiac disease, stupidity.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, it's actually on there. Anyways, and they still chose me, so there you go. We're in good hands, Burlington. All right.
So, Mike, I guess the thing is, do we have to deal with this at our next meeting?
You
Yeah,
can wait
what?
till the following meeting if you need to. And if you're wanting Chelsea here, that might be something that needs to be done.
Can we get Chelsea here for next week?
We can ask for
To our
either
next,
her
to our
or
next
Jason.
work session?
Sure.
Next work session. Chelsea. Does that work? Should we drop this from this agenda and move it? You okay with that?
You know what, I want to, let's go ahead and do that, but I was gonna check, is there any way that we could get her on for the council meeting, even if she just talked afterwards for,
You're either gonna want her, if,
I'm
to
just
come to this
saying, I don't
next
think,
council
I don't
meeting to
think she
take
wants to
action, or you
wait
can
on
make
that.
make it wait till the following work session, one route or the other.
Makes no difference to
Oh,
me.
okay, well, we'll just put it on the work session then, and if something comes up, she can deal with it. All right, let's move on. Number 4, resolution approving installation of temporary traffic control at the intersection of Division Street and West Burlington Avenue.
We have addressed this already, but
Braden just
we
talked
have a little
about it.
bit more information from Braden on it.
Braden Hill, Property Maintenance Manager. Yes, as it is, we wanted to set up the resolution in case we ran into the problems that we talked about before.
Right.
The funds that we had figured for temporary, we thought we would funnel into the movement of what we already own right now that would cover that intersection. Nick and I both just felt that it would be prudent to have this in front of you so that you knew in July or something, if there was a problem, what we could do to move forward to make it smoother and operate better. So basically, we wanted to bring this to your attention as an option over the left turns.
Questions?
And when it comes to that, people may figure out alternative routes so that there won't be quite
And
so
we
many.
feel that a lot of the citizens are gonna.
The old school, yeah.
They'll find a way that's handier for them or quicker for them if they have a specific destination.
Are we good?
Great.
Mountain, thank you, my friend. Okay, we've got two public hearings set. One is consideration of plans and specifications for the 2017 flood mitigation Phase 5, and then the second is consideration of plans and specifications for the 2017 depot storm sewer improvements. We also have 4 discussions tonight. The first, Treasurer's report. Annette?
So in your packet is February's treasurer's report. I was just going to point out a couple of things, like we did get our first payment for our flood mitigation fund for our increment. So we received that, and it's about half of what we're going to get for the year. It's projected at about half. And then like on the capital projects page, the larger balances are all things that are either going to be covered by transfers that we'll do, because we only do transfers twice a year, or that we're bonding for, so when we get the bond proceeds, they'll funnel in there and clear up some of those. And then the other ones are just the normal, the recplex by the end of the year, hopefully will be, in the golf course will be taken care of, so. I don't know if there's anything you guys had questions about.
Any questions for Annette?
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Annette. Good job. Number 2, city council meeting rules. Attorney? Where's my?
So we brought this up for discussion after we had a meeting in February where one of our staff members was not necessarily talked about in a positive or uplifting manner, and we did want to have at least a little bit of a discussion of if you were to have some consideration of what you're allowing folks to say, or how long, or just the structure of public input, how would you even go about that? And if you're interested in doing something, well, even if you can't, we want to be able to talk about what you can do, and then is the council even interested, if anything, on having some limitations either on the content of how people talk, whether you have some rules about respectful communication, or the timeline of their communications. And part of that, I guess I'll turn it up to the attorney, and we wanted to make sure he was here to have this discussion, was how do you do that in a way that makes sure that you don't violate anyone's rights to be heard? So I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Patrick to kind of give some sort of a framework over what you could or couldn't do.
Well, Jim very helpfully located another city's policy on decorum at the city council meetings. The main point that I wanted to raise with the council is probably the same point that's on all of your minds. People, once you open the public forum to public discourse, if you have an open microphone at certain given times during the meeting, there's a lot of complicated case law on this, but it falls into a category of protected speech once you open the microphone. And so while you can have valid time, place, and manner restrictions on that, in other words, screaming and hurling obscenities and things like that, you can always limit those kinds of things. You can limit the time frame in which a person speaks. You can limit the manner in which they address civil or uncivil, so to speak, but you may not limit content in terms of political speech. And I would be very cautious about doing that. If someone has an opinion, they're in the 3-minute window, and they're respectful about that opinion. I think once you open the mic and you say there's no limits on the topic, you didn't place any limits or restrictions on the topic ahead of time, they can finish what they have to say. One thing that I can tell you can do, I'll give you just a fact pattern.
You say can or can't?
Can. I'll give you an example, Your Honor, of a case that you know, it's a fairly well-known case now where a political candidate was basically thrown out of a forum because he would not follow the rules and wait his turn to speak, and he was unruly, and they took him out, and he said that you violated my First Amendment rights, and the court said no, you still have to follow the rules, and the body that invited you they can define the topic, subject matter that you're allowed to speak on. If they don't have an open mic on any subject, then you can be confined to that subject. They can have valid time, place, and manner restrictions, including behaving yourself and waiting your turn, limiting yourself to the time that's been set, because this is a public meeting and you have other business you need to conduct. I know oftentimes it's very hard to tell someone to come out who comes up here and has something they're passionate about and they want to talk to the council about it and they want to talk to the world about it, to say, I'm sorry, but we've got X amount of time. And when they're done, you can cut them off. And that is a perfectly valid way of controlling a meeting. So those kinds of things are allowed. The thing that you can't do is say, well, I see that you're here because you want to talk about, you want to say something that I believe substantively I disagree with.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's what you don't want to do. If you don't want that, if you want to control your meeting and have a careful agenda, then you don't have an open mic at all. That you can do. You can say, we've got too much going on tonight, we're not going to have an open mic tonight. That you can do.
Oh, we can do that.
But often-
For the evening, you're saying?
Correct.
We can make that announcement before the.
Well, you would set that in the agenda. You would state that we're only having an open mic during certain meetings. Audience comment, as often cities call it.
But now the way we do it, each issue that we come up with, the mayor then asks if anybody from the audience wants to speak on that subject. Could that be delayed and say we don't do that until the end of the meeting?
As long as it's on the agenda, you can do it in any order that the mayor determines.
And that was an answer to your question. One thing that Mason City did, as an example, they had, and I don't necessarily like what they're doing, but it's it's one of the avenues that's out there. They have a council or public input on items that are on the agenda, and they have that at the front of the agenda. And they allow anyone to come up and speak on a given item. They give 3 minutes for that conversation. It's put into their rules for how they're going to operate. And their design and intent there is to try to get all the public input on all of those items up front.
Up front.
And then when you go to start the council meeting to move through, and you have your own discussion on the items. The only spot then where there would be public input under their structure is when you have a public hearing, where you do it during the course of the meeting. Otherwise, they're doing it in they have two set defined comment periods. The one at the front end for items on the agenda, then they have a second defined comment period at the end. In fact, they close the meeting and turn off the cameras.
Right, and turn off the cameras.
And then allow people to speak within their defined parameters.
I have a couple of comments about that, if I could. I agree with you, I don't like that. And the suggestion that you made, it would be non-germane for anybody to come up after the fact and talk about it. But a question for you, Patrick, if we adjourn the meeting and turn off the cameras and allow people to come up, are we in essence holding an illegal meeting then?
Yeah, I think that if you are meeting as a council and you're discussing, first of all, any discussion has to be limited to the agenda, number one. Number two, you can't do that outside of published meeting time. Once the mayor says we're adjourned, we're adjourned. And I wouldn't recommend that, because even if the media is here and everybody else is still here and we're still pretending we're in a meeting, we're not. We just adjourned, so I wouldn't do that either. The one thing I would say is that you can, and I would encourage you to, control the meeting if someone is belligerent. I think the council can adopt decorum rules. And if those rules are violated, the way other cities do it, and which makes a lot of sense, is the mayor would say, now, sir, you just did X. Don't do that anymore, because if you do that again, I'm going to have you removed from the meeting. And that is a fair warning, and that would be stated also in the council's rules.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one area where I think there's merit that we can have some play there. If somebody is coming to me, this is not the place for ad hominem. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and we've gotten some of that. I've got one person that came in and he called out one of our employees, which everybody knows it's bogus, you know what I'm saying? But the bottom line is he still he still said adhere. And to me, this isn't the place to get personal or to call out anybody by name. And I would like, is there any room on something like that? Because sometimes we get people coming back, you know, they're saying the same thing, trying to call it the same people. And, you know, to me, if you're not bringing anything new, and you're just trying to call people out for whatever reason, to me, that's not the place for this. Everything else, you know, I don't want to silence the public. You know, I'm not for that. But is there anything with that we can do?
Well, the meeting can be confined to substantive matters, and you can adopt a decorum rule that states ad hominem attacks on individuals are not permitted.
Don't we
You can
have
come
to
in and
do
make
that?
all the arguments you want, but
There's a
you
handout.
shouldn't be saying, I call out Councilmember Scott, or I call out, you know, if you make a rule as a city council that everyone will be treated that way, we want civility and decorum in here, you can do that. And then if that person continues after being warned once, I would suggest that you can then remove that person from the meeting. Because it's not a you know, you don't get a license to conduct yourself any way you want at a public meeting.
One of the things that I forwarded to you earlier, because was the City of Hiawatha, their rules of procedure.
Yeah, I got that.
And one of the things that they've done within that is they have some specified rules of decorum for how comments should be structured. We do have a handout that's over on the table that has some suggestions, but it doesn't have a structure such as this that spells out what is allowed and what is not allowed, and a process for how that lays out in a written form the consequences for doing something. If there was an interest in seeing something that was stronger than what we have right now as a suggestion with no defined consequences, this is the type of structure that you could look at doing. But then you have to follow through with it if you're going to do it with one, you have to make sure that you're doing it on a consistent basis.
I would like to see us, next work session, take a look at that handout, or get it to us before so we can look it over and see if there's
Yeah, I
what
just
else
got
we'd
that
like
on,
to
I
do.
think, Friday.
Yeah, you know, I'm sorry I didn't think about that before. But this is something that a number of years ago when I went to the League of Cities meetings, they talked about this open meeting thing, and they said that during the public comment section, say you come up and you make a comment, then we're not supposed to respond because it's not on the agenda. And at the time, I never liked that thought, and we started doing that, and then we got some negative feedback, so we quit doing that. So is that correct? If you come up and you start making comments during the public meeting, or during the public comment section, we are not supposed to respond. Is that correct?
Council members should not either deliberate or take any action on any matter that is not on the agenda. Now, does it violate the open meetings law if a member simply comments and does nothing more than simply comment? Possibly. That argument exists because someone could interpret that as deliberation. You are now influencing people next to you, and then once another council person chimes in, you're suddenly deliberating on something that no one at home knew was going to be on the agenda. And so that's, you know, and technically, no, you shouldn't do that. And I've seen in other cities where they're so fearful of being accused of violating the open meetings law that the mayor will say, you are reminded that the reason no one is saying anything is because we're not allowed to. Because he's always afraid of looking like I'm a deer in the headlights and I have no idea, you know, I should say something because this was a very dramatic thing you just said, and the entire city council sitting there in stony-faced silence, even though they all know they should say something to defend themselves.
Oh, where are you getting accused of being
That's how
heartless?
afraid they are of a lawsuit. And, you know, the reality is I don't know what you would have for damages. I don't know what, but the answer to your question, Councilmember Davidson, is technically you should not deliberate or take any action on anything unless it's on your agenda.
Okay, all right, so you come up with a concern I should be able to turn to either Eric or Jim and say, could you look into what's concerned? Am I allowed to do that?
I don't know that that would constitute deliberation.
Okay, all right, so.
And if Jim nodded and said, I'll take care of that,
Yeah,
that would be the end of it. I don't know that anybody would object and think that the public is, not aware that there's some new agenda item moving forward, because presumably Jim would bring it back to another council meeting and it would then be presented, so I don't know that I would have a lot of problem with that.
okay. So, council, that's really the only reason that I would be interested in having some type of time limit on how long people can speak. If we're not allowed to respond or give a reasonable answer to some wild hair idea that somebody comes up with, I don't know that I'm interested in having them stand there for 10 or 15 minutes and go on and go on and go on and give their campaign speech about whatever it is they want to campaign about. So that's the only reason I would suggest we might want to consider a time limit on that portion of the meeting. I'm not talking about during the regular agenda portion. I'm just talking about the public audience
Yeah.
participation.
I mean, I don't know that I would limit public hearings in
Yeah.
terms of time. I
Right.
would just leave that wide open, but the audience comment, that would be a reasonable precaution to take.
I had a council member suggest that they don't want to have a time limit, but there are certain people that they would like to have when they get out of control. And that's where the problem comes in, is if you either got to do it consistently across the board
Right.
or not at all. Is that kind of correct?
However caustic an individual may seem, if they follow the rules and are civil at the podium, they get 3 minutes just like everybody else, is the way I would.
So, hey.
I would encourage you to do it that way. Just, everybody needs to get their fair shot at saying what they need to say, as long as they don't violate your rules. And I think once you make those rules known, no ad hominem attacks on people,
Right.
no shouting, no physical disturbances, no, you can do whatever you want to keep the meeting civil and keep it on track. Which I think is something, if you read, for example, some of these exemplar policies like the one that Jim mentioned, you'll have a lot of good ideas to bring back to another meeting. This one here, I think, is very good.
Well, I guess we're all going to digest this information, and so, do you guys want to bring this back at the next work session to?
And if you're saying that, what structure do you want to see? Are you interested in seeing something, I can start with a model, I mean, the one that I've seen, I don't know if Patrick has other ones, the one that Hiawatha has, is fairly well written in terms of their citizen participation section. I could bring back that language for you to take a look at for consideration of whether you would like to adopt that.
Is Hiawatha's, because I just started to glance over it.
I just sent it this afternoon, so
But,
you didn't get a chance.
Is this coming with time limits or with
They
verbiage
have,
for?
they have both content, the way you treat people, as well as a time limit. Now, just because that's what they have presented, you can, that's saying that that's something for you to take a look at, and do you like that? Is it something close to what you would like, and then what changes would you like to see, if you would want to? But is that something that the council as a whole would like to have brought back under that kind of a format for consideration?
Yes.
Interesting.
I don't look 5,445 words on 18 pages to.
Nope, that's just that one.
Dictate how we're gonna run a meeting.
That's,
Well said.
Hiawatha's policy has much more than that. I think the section on that conduct is 2 pages of it,
That's exactly my thought.
which is what would be presenting as just that portion.
Yeah. I
And
agree.
it would be good if the council posted what it adopts and makes it available at all the meetings so that everybody is aware of
Absolutely.
when they appear and they come up here, this is what they can do and what they shouldn't do.
Yeah, maybe we need to have, instead of that screen, maybe etiquette on there before we post, you know what I'm saying, so that people are reminded, some people need to have the reminder.
Well, why don't we just have them come 30 minutes early and they can sit down and watch a video on how to act at a council meeting.
Well,
And then we can get our whips out and they can,
you'd
and
think in
every time they act up,
2007,
we can give them 30 lashes.
They're a tongue-in-cheek remark there.
you'd think in 2017 that adults would know how to behave themselves,
I don't
but
know what we've
sometimes.
done. I first stepped up that podium in 1982 and stood before a city council at a budget hearing. And the meetings were run almost identical to the way they're run today.
Yeah.
And there were still people that come to the podium and spoke their piece and that the council didn't agree with at the time. And some got out of hand and they were gavelled down and everything was cool, and we went on to the next meeting, and we got things done in this community. We keep finding ways to silence ourselves and silence our citizens, and
That is not my intent.
I would rather be working on ways to engage the citizens and not control them. So many of them have given up.
That's not good. We are going to move forward with bringing us.
We're talking about whether we actually do it.
Well, it's something. Yeah, it's something that people aren't getting any better with communication skills. So it's definitely something that's going to be on the radar. Okay. Next we have the 2004 street assessment.
This has come forward with your request at the last meeting. I don't know if you want to have the person making the request come forward and kind of give a summary of what they're asking for. But we also wanted to have the city attorney be able to chime in terms of, he did ask him to review the process that was used when that assessment was originally done back in 2004. One, just to make sure that it was done appropriately, and then to try to give you some ideas in terms of what you could potentially look at if you were to talk about doing some level of alteration to the assessment. Did you want to have the lady come forward?
Kathy?
Ms. Little?
I wasn't expecting to be up there. My name is Kathy Little. And back in 2004, I believe it was, I was not involved in this. It was my parents. My father has since passed away, and my mother's 85, and I'm trying to help her out. But they approached them about putting a road in. Do you want to put the picture up again? That's the intersection of West Avenue and West Burlington Avenue where you're going to be putting in the roundabout.
Yep.
The property to your left is the property where the apartments are, where last week you voted to give them more money for another building they're going to put up there. And then my mother's property is to the right. And they have owned that since about 1971, 1972. And they were approached by the city that the apartments next door needed two ways in and out because they were going to put so many apartments in there. And to do that, they needed to take part of their ground. And this is all what I've gotten from my mother and from notes that she kept from back then. But they were given three options. One of them was to donate the land. One of them was to have it appraised and sell it, and the third one was eminent domain. They chose to go ahead with the appraisal and have the city pay them. So the city did pay them at that time for about 1.25 acres maybe, and then another 0.22 acre for easements. They went to several meetings, and my mom's recollection is that they were told at one point that they would never have to pay for that road. And then they were also told that they would never have to pay anything until the property was sold. Then we got a new assessor, and the assessor reassessed their property and took away their agricultural deferment, even though they have 10 acres right now in hay. But at the time that this road was put in, there were other roads in the area that were being paid for, not being assessed to the adjacent homeowners. My parents had no access to that road. There's no driveways coming in and out of their property. They've gotten no benefits from this road being in there, other than letters from the city when we don't mow the side. But I guess, long story short, I am asking that the assessment that was put on for this be treated like the other roads that were built at that same time period, and that she not be made to pay. Right now, we're looking at $49,288.30 plus whatever interest that's owed because I couldn't make the payment in September. They have offered to let us make payments on that. My mom is on Social Security, and that's all she has, and she still has a mortgage on that property. The property next door for the apartments did get incentives of $955,675, where my parents didn't receive any incentives. And if anything, it's made their land less valuable because it took some acreage away from theirs. The only thing that's happened, they keep telling us that it's going to make the land more valuable, but their taxes have more than doubled in that time period. They're over $4,500 now, and there haven't been any improvements made since that home was built, and I think it was 1984, after they lost their other home to a house fire. So that's what I'm asking.
Talk to us, Jim.
Well, what I can tell you, we weren't involved in this process from a staff perspective, but, and thank you, Kathy. When the request came in, this originally was asked of, I think a couple of council members may have individually had this request come to them last year. And so we had to go and take a look at what was done back then. I think, and I'm going to go off memory because this is 7 or 8 months ago or longer. Was that Mike Pearson that owned the land at the time? He wasn't the developer who was looking to build, but he was the owner of the property at the time that this was done. I don't know where the incentives that you're talking about, might have been the state incentives?
Probably the enterprise zone, I would assume. They got enterprise zone benefits, tax credits.
So they received funding towards their project, but it wasn't from the city. We did participate, not that we weren't part of the process, because the enterprise zone does require action from the city, but it's not city funds that went into it. The project itself, as they looked at putting in that street, that road is designed eventually to tie around to Mason Road. And this was part of that when they went to do this project, even though it was for specifically that project, it was set up to be in line with what would allow Mason Road, the alternative road around that wrapped around over to Mason Road, to be completed at some point in the future. The cost of the project was set up to be paid 50% by the city and 50% by the adjoining property owners. So as it went through the paperwork, you can see where the owner of the property acknowledged that there is an assessment going to be that could be as high as, at the time, it was originally $71,000 for the street for their share of the street to go in. Eventually ended up down in that $49,000 range. I'm not sure the exact amount. That was their 25% portion of the project. The other property owner that was paid their assessment up front, Mike Pearson, wrote a check and covered his share as the project developed. Everything that was done along the way matched the appropriate process to do an assessment. Kathy's right that not every other street, there were several streets that were constructed at the time that, or in that somewhat proximate time, that didn't involve assessment. So you had others that did. At this point, though, you're 12 years after the fact, and how do you deal with something that was all done in an appropriate manner? Now, at the time when it was done, the city received the letter requesting the ag deferment. I don't know if that was addressed to Kathleen as the city clerk. I'm not sure what role the city clerk plays in that. The county assessor is the one who ends up giving that, at this point anyway, designation. But we did work with them on trying to do our part to allow that ag deferral. Ultimately, though, we don't control it. They did have the option to pay it up front. They didn't choose to, but that's not now, or that's not where we're at now. I understand where they're at. They have a significant issue with, they were hoping not to be in a position to have to make this payment until they sold the property, and that's not, with the loss of the ag deferral from the county, they're not in that position. I did want to have the city attorney, again, when you get into this kind of stuff, what ifs of what you can or can't do, this gets a little out of my pay grade.
Well, the city manager's correct. I mean, we had nothing to do with the agricultural deferment. The communication we received from the owner basically stated that they were in the process of applying for the ag deferment. And we probably shrugged our shoulders at the time and said, well, good, because apparently that paved the way forward for them to agree. They actually used the agreement and waiver process. They asked us to do this, which is one way in which these assessment projects can proceed. I mean, the budding owners can come in and they can request the city develop one of the applicable and legal means of an assessment process is to construct a road or a street, and that's exactly what we were doing, and so it was legal to do. And they came in and they said, we want you to go ahead and build out the street. They asked us to do it, and they said, we understand that as a condition to this, that our assessment won't exceed $71,000. And further, they just put in, as it's almost like a footnote in the document they provided, that by the way, we've applied for an ag deferment. So we don't think we're going to have to pay this anyway. Well, the code, unfortunately, the Iowa code, I mean, and the way the code reads, if the ag deferment goes away, the ag deferment ends. I mean, if the characterization of the property is no longer ag for taxable reasons, then the deferment goes away. And I think that's exactly correct what Jim stated, that the landowner didn't anticipate the ag deferment going away, and that's why there's a problem. Now, they did receive $47,000 from the city back when the eminent domain process ended, and it was settled based on the value, fair market value of the parcel. And they chose at that time just to not use that to pay off the assessment, probably because they had an ag deferment, which makes perfect sense. That's probably why they held on to the cash, and now they don't apparently have the cash, and they're coming to you. And what Jim has just asked is, you know, is there anything that the council can do to make this easier? There are some options. First, the Iowa code places a limit on the interest rate, and currently it's 9%, or at least it was when I researched it in August. I think it's still what it is. But there's no prohibition in reducing the interest rate. You could reduce it to less than 1% if you wanted, which would assist, I'm sure. That's one thing. Secondly, if you wanted, you could stretch the period out to 15 years, which would reduce, of course, the size of the installment payments substantially. That could be done. I mean, the council has the ability by ordinance or resolution to pass laws, and you could literally pass an ordinance doing away with it if you wanted, which would be at the other extreme. You could reduce the principal amount if you wanted. Do an owing if you wanted. You've got all those options if you want to go ahead and enact the legislation needed to get it done, which isn't, actually could be done by resolution.
Out of those options, the change in the time frame for repayment and the interest rate has no impact on any other assessments, because that's specific to each assessment schedule. And this was the only assessment on this one. The other person paid his up front, so didn't have any interest that they paid.
Right. There's no one to compare it to in this case.
An option of waiving a portion or all of the assessment, does that have any impact or potential liability?
Not necessarily, no. I don't know that it would. It certainly would make you look as if you're being arbitrary, possibly. That argument could be made that you have received money already from one abutting owner who was not, by the way, assessed. He simply paid. There was no necessity of going through the assessment process. He just simply paid in lieu of the assessment. That would be the problem, is that you could have an issue with people comparing you to the way others were treated. But I don't know that you're exposed in terms of liability if you pass an ordinance, recognizing whatever factors you want to recognize and change the terms of the repayment or the amount of the repayment. You're stewards of the public funds, and you can do that.
Is there any way that we can make this line up to what originally was thought, was that this money can be paid after the house is sold? That we can just delay it and the money can be paid as stated before? That when her mother decides to sell the house? To me, then, the money's taken care of. Nobody can say that it wasn't paid. Her mother's covered, so she's not worried about her place to stay, and we're all getting older, and God forbid, I don't wish anything bad on your mother, but we've all got to go see the Lord eventually at some point in time, and we can wait till that time is up, and however long that takes, is let God can tarry, what I'm saying, and take his time. But is there any way that we could do that? And then
I don't know the answer to that, and that's a legal question you're raising, Your Honor, and I would like to take a look at that. The statute does not, the Iowa Code does not so specifically provide. What you're basically suggesting is a city mandated deferral of almost as if, like the county assessor is removing the agricultural deferral. You're saying we want to we need to keep it there. We're going to keep it there by city ordinance. I don't know if that's.
I suspect you don't have that right. I think that my suspicion is that if you have assessment rules that are set out by state statute, that is out of the parameters. Even though he, from a legal perspective, would have to research as to whether you could find some way around it. That's not contemplated in the code, and I don't think that he's going to find the legal authority to do that.
I can look, of course, and report back and provide
there's,
a memorandum.
Isn't there a different way to frame that, but still, still do the same thing?
I appreciate you're looking for a creative solution, and I can see what I can come up with, and I may want to speak with finance counsel on it as well.
By the unfortunate fact that they live in this place at this time, and at the time of the development, they've had not one but two assessments for streets. the street in front of their house, which is West Avenue, which is a heavily traveled street, one of the busiest streets in town, they had to pay for when it was improved. And there were only a few households that did, because once it got to the county picked up the rest of the cost of that outside the city limits. So they were stuck with paying for that. And then when they extended West Burlington Avenue for this project, they got assessed again for that, when the rest of West Burlington Avenue was paid for with TIF dollars. And the rest in Division Street, right across the street from them, was paid in TIF dollars. And when Bauer Drive and Howard Drive were paid with TIF or other tax dollars, just by virtue of where they live, they get stuck with an extra $50,000 bill. And I could tell you, I was mayor at the time, and I talked with Marvel Davis, and he was extremely confused about what had taken place. No, he signed the papers. He probably should have had more legal counsel than what he had.
I don't know.
But he was confused at the time because he came to me. And I went to the city manager, and the city manager said, not a problem, he's got an ag deferment. So, being less knowledgeable than what I am today, I had no idea that deferment just meant that it was deferred until something else happened. I thought it would never have to be paid. And I think my ignorance at the time may have played a part in where they're at today. And because I didn't have or didn't get or didn't explain properly to Kathy's father. I've looked at other things that we've done in this community, and one was we bought down a huge building in the business park right across the street from where their property's at, just down a ways. It was a property that was owned by the Chamber of Commerce, and we committed to paying them $500,000 through a reverse TIF over a certain period of time. They're going to get shorted a little bit because of the tax abatement that come first. But we were able to do something like that for a wealthy business person and for a mover and shaker in the community. I can't. I would think that we can come up with a method for helping somebody that's already paid for 2 streets. I've not met another person anywhere in this town that's had to pay, that's lived on a corner and had to pay for 2 streets, especially a major street construction on the front and on the side. You know, they've been assessed for sill coat, but never a major reconstruction from gravel or farmland to concrete. And I would sure like to see us make it right.
I just, for the record, I support trying to do something for Marvel Davis's wife. I just want to state that now. Again, this is a work session, but I want to do something for Marvel Davis's wife.
This is not an everyday situation. This is very unique within the city.
I would concur that the fact pattern is unusual. I recall I'm being brought in and looking at this 11 years later also. So I guess what I would suggest is that the city manager and I regroup and see whether, now that I've heard your sentiments on the issue, I might suggest that we come back to you with some legal options, whatever they are, and then let you make those decisions. Probably we'll provide that in a confidential memorandum of sorts so that you can read it at your leisure outside the meeting, and then you can get back together and discuss it.
Thank you, sir.
If that makes sense. And I might recommend that we consult with bond counsel as well on this, just because it's an unusual fact pattern and it does involve city finance, so.
You guys okay?
Yes.
God bless you, my friend. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Kathy Little again. I first would like to have a copy of the document that he's talking about that my parents signed asking for the road, because I remember at the time that they fought tooth and nail to stop it. They didn't want the road, they didn't ask for it, it was of no use to them. And their attorney advised them that you can't fight City Hall, this is gonna happen no matter what, so you might as well just go along with what they want. So, and I don't know if I should mention or not, but at the time, their attorney that they had used for years was also the city's attorney.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Okay, so are we good there? We can move forward? Again, thanks for taking the time to come down.
Eric, you want to get Kathy a copy of that?
Number 4 on discussion items. Thank you, Mr. Scott. Chief, the police annual report.
Patrick, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. Council, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. Chief, I don't have one. Is this yours?
That's mine.
Yeah, here,
Maybe I didn't get one because
Here you
I
go.
wasn't here at the time.
we got it.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thanks for taking a few minutes to listen to me tonight and talk about our annual report. First and foremost, I want to thank Kristen Elan. She's an administrative assistant in our office, and she really worked diligently to help me compile all these statistics and put this report together. So thank you, Kristen. It'd be a really, really difficult job without her, so a special thanks to her and her help.
She's terrific, isn't she?
She's fantastic, and I want to make that clear. So I want to talk a little bit about our accomplishments in 2016. I know that the council has made it a priority when we talk about nuisances and abandoned vehicles, so I put that up very first on the list. And for the very most part, you need to understand that we have one parking enforcement officer that works part-time 28 hours a week. And for the very most part, she worked 532 abandoned vehicles, towed 57 of those vehicles that were taken care of through the salvage title process. And then the remaining, got those taken care of with a cooperating effort, let's say, between the owners of the vehicles and what we have as an abandoned vehicle ordinance. It can be difficult at times, and I know Councilman Scott is well aware of our efforts and how the code and how it reads, and trying to work with people and find resolution to this. I mean, it's a difficult thing when you live in a community that at the most people had one vehicle, at the most, in a lot of the areas of town, and now those same families maybe have 2, 3, 4, 5 vehicles, and what do you do with them? And as we go through this process, it's inoperable. Well, what's wrong? Well, it won't start. Well, because I don't have a battery, or I can't afford a battery, and now you got a tow bill, and how do you ever afford to put a battery? So, I mean, with that said, I understand the intent of the law versus the letter of the law. And we certainly tried to make that work. But it is a priority of the department to work these, and I wanted to point that out. The 96% compliance rate for seatbelt usage, we monitor this 4 times a year, and we do that through federal dollars, the Governor Traffic Safety Alliance. We apply for those dollars, and it's very important that we keep this rate above 90%. We would for sure be questioned on some of those dollars if it got below that. And actually, as you see go through here, we had a little better year, so to speak, in traffic citations. And again, a lot of that traffic enforcement comes from this federal grant. And I think our grant award this year was up, or in 2016 was up about $2,500 from the year previous, which allowed us more time to work traffic. It is complete. The digital radio system now is 100% in effect for all law enforcement in Des Moines County. It's been a tough transition. It's like anything else, you know, it's never a painless, seamless transition like they told us. Oh, when it's all ready to go, we're going to flip a switch, and yeah, you sure flipped the switch.
Don't you wish?
Trust me, yeah, it didn't work that way. But I think for the most part, most of those bugs are worked out. Are they completely worked out? No, but it's so much better than it was 6 or 8 months ago. And as we go forward, it allows us with so much flexibility in our system. I mean, we're to the point now, you key a mic and the dispatcher instantly knows who keyed that mic. And even if they can't say a word, they know who keyed that mic. And we have an alarm system now on the radios, and there's just going to be so many things we can do with these digital radios that we couldn't do before.
And does that include the fire department too?
Yeah, they're not completely digital yet, but they're moving forward with that plan. They're having a big propagation study done right now, so yeah, it's headed to the digital world as well. We're on UHF, they're on VHF, otherwise I think we could have did the whole system. And this was all funded by E911 dollars.
Right.
There wasn't any of our, per se, tax dollars here in the community that went to the project. And now that our project completed, it was about a 5 or 6 year process, but now those 911 dollars can go towards funding a capital project for the fire department, and it's well underway.
Okay, thank you.
The $21,328, if you remember, I come to the council, and if we get lucky every year, we have a chance to put in for those community block grants, and hopefully we'll get another chance. But I just wanted to let you know that we did put in for that. You approved it. We did receive the funding, and we do have that storage in place for our digital cameras. And that should really last us well into the future. I mean, when you start talking about all the car cameras we have, and then you throw body camera video on top of that, if you know anything about IT and storage, video is a major demand on that. So I think we're pretty good in that arena for several years to come. Briefly, we're working diligently on a regional critical incident team. It's a CIT team where we're going to try to train, we're going to train officers, 4 officers in the department to deal with mental health, especially critical incidents. And this training is...
starting?
What's that?
When's that start?
Well, we're doing it now, and we've been at it for about a year, and we probably got about another 16 months to go. But there's funding now regionally for the assistance in mental health and some of these crises. And we've been able to tap some of that funding for the training for officers. And it's a fairly popular model, like in San Diego, let's say, or in San Antonio has a wonderful CIT program. And they have one in Johnson County. Hasn't been underway very long, but we did go up there and talk to them about theirs. But kind of what it's going to boil down to is we're going to have police officers especially trained to handle these incidents. And we hope to get to the point that we could then either have a psychiatrist, psychologist that we could call that could come to these incidents with us, or what some departments are doing, they're using technology through tablets and they're actually FaceTiming, and to help us interview these people and really figure out what the problem is, and really to open up access points. Right now, the police, as we try to deal with all these mental health issues, we don't have any access points. We don't have any way to really deal with the problem. So part of this is just a big partnership and process to get access points, to get training, and to try to really deal with this problem instead of, well, what do we have left? Well, the jail, and that's not an option. This doesn't work. So we're really working hard to get that done. Just briefly, you're well aware, but the $70,000 for the K-9, I just again want to thank the community. Unbelievable.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, she was up in the office today, and I promise I'll get her up here. She's doing so much better. She's so much better adjusted in just 2 or 3 months than what she was. So that program's really coming around, and Officer Smith is doing a great job with her. The reserve officers, just briefly, the thing I want you to key in on here is 929 hours. 929 hours. I mean, that's half an FTE. That's equivalent of $40,000 that these folks work full-time and have offered to come in and give us their services. And we'll continue to grow the program, but I want a special thanks to them and the officers that have helped train them. And it's a wonderful program, and the community that came together that raised the $50,000, it's well underway. I mean, we got 5, we're gonna have 5 full-time. We'll try to plug a couple more in this year, but as we add officers, you know, I would really like to put 4 or 5 more on this year, but that would be almost an impossible task as we try to add officers at the same time. But we will try to get that number up to 7 or 8. So hopefully when we do this annual report next year, we're well over 1,000 donated hours to the department.
That's awesome.
The bank building's going along good. We meet again tomorrow, Wednesday. We have phone conferences every other Wednesday with our construction manager, Carly Nelson, and Wilson Estes. We're trying to put numbers now to the design. The floor plan's pretty much the way we think it's going to be, but we got to make sure we're within budget. And if we're not, we'll go back to the floor plan again. Trust me, we've been doing this for several months now, but they clearly understand where I am and where the city manager and where this council is on the budgeted money for this project. And that's our goal, is to keep it within that budget and trim wherever we need to trim. So it's moving right along. As far as we know, that date's still pretty solid. It seems to me that the bank out there is really going along at a good pace. They had a great winter, but you know, to date, we're still talking about that August of them moving out of the bank. So we would like to have our construction documents out and bids received prior to that date, or that would be our goal.
Guess what, Chief? We're gonna be moving into a new police building.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. That is gonna happen. It has become a reality. Briefly, just talk a little bit about animal control. I know even back in 12 and 13, we talked about trying to reduce the animal calls for service, and we have. You're gonna see how that's been working. So I just wanted to plug it in there about the number of animals that have been received at the shelter and kind of what happened to those animals and how they were put back to the community. So let's talk just briefly about our organizational chart, because I just showed this to you when we talked about staffing for the police department. But just to get you up to speed, because it's our #1 priority to get a detective back in CID. I mean, as we talked about this 2 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, that was the goal. So I direct you towards like Squad D, where we have Squad C's and D's. There, you see a vacancy there and a vacancy on C, and then over on A. Well, P.O. Henning and P.O. Jenkins, you'll see where they come under the FTO training. They're almost done. They're getting ready to start their shadow program. So as soon as they complete their shadow program, we'll plug those in probably on C squad and D squad. So those squads will be staffed. We'll still have a vacancy on A squad, but our SROs will be coming out of the school for the summer. And the plan would be to get an SRO, or between the two of them, make sure we can fill that vacancy on squad A, and then move an officer back to CID for the summer months. And as we go through the hiring process, we're making conditional officers, or 3 offers right now to start the May 8th Academy. So they're going to get out in August. They get done with the FTO program approximately January timeframe, December timeframe. And so we'd have about a 3 or 4 month stint there where the SROs have to go back to the school. And can we keep that guy in CID during those months? That's still yet to be seen. I think my initial plan right now in my mind is the SRO in the middle school is funded 45%. We keep them there 100% of the time because I truly believe in that program. But it's a priority thing. It's a trade-off, you know. And if I have to, maybe we keep them in the school 50% of the time and try to keep that person in CID. So as I explain that to you, I want you to understand that there's going to be a balancing act there between what we do. Now, when those guys get out of the program in January or December, whenever that happens, then it's no problem. Then we got the SROs where we need them, we got the detectives where we need them, and we got our squads filled. So that was all part of the proposal that I brought forward. I just wanted you to know where are we at today. Where does it stand right now? And that's where it stands. So, and I'll keep you up to date on that as we go forward. Years of service, and the only reason I bring this up is it's really critical as we talk about going forward and keeping the department with experience on these different squads that you saw. And so it's important if we look at like less than a year to, let's just say, 4 years. I mean, you got, what, 7, 8, 9, you got 10 officers, and we got 5 officers between 1 and 2 years experience, and we're getting ready to add 3 more. So you can see that some of our squads are really going to be loaded up with young guys, and that's okay. It's not to say they can't do the job, but I mean, they really get to going after about 3 or 4 years of service. They've pretty much seen what there is to see, and so just as a community and as a department, and as a council, we just need to remember there's going to be quite a few young officers out there, new faces, and we'll work together and get them the training they need and get them going on the right path. Now let's slide on down to 26 years of service through 29 years of service. And you can see that that's really loaded up down there too. In Iowa anyway, it's 55, and the years of service aren't near as important as a retirement date, but to keep you in mind, most officers are around that 29 to 31 or 32 years. And so as you look at that, you're looking at 8 or 10 officers in the next, 4 or 5 years that would be eligible to retire. So that's just something I think you always need to be aware of. You know, where are we at as a department, and what's our average tenure, and how are we going to manage that? And with that said, I know that we concentrate on trying to bring some certified guys into the department, and we've really struggled with that. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons for that. I think that we're a smaller department in comparison to what's going on out there around us, so it's difficult for us to recruit. And then sometimes you get the guys that they travel a lot between departments. And really, why are you doing that? And is that something that we really, really want when we can train a guy from the beginning and make sure that he understands our culture and is doing exactly what we want? We will continue to pursue that because we have picked up some fantastic officers that were certified, but it's just difficult for us. And so, but as we look at this tenure, I really got that in mind. I mean, if we could pick up a guy with 8 years, 10 years, 12 years of service and plug him into this matrix, it would really help us as we go down the road. So it's a difficult thing, but it's on our mind and it's something that we're trying to do. The reason I bring this up is it has really changed, and it's a wonderful change to see in law enforcement, especially at the Burlington Police Department in our secondary education. I mean, we're to the point now where it's half and half. And just to let you know where that is going in the future, of these 3 people that we just were getting ready to make conditional offers, 2 of them have 4-year degrees, and 1 of them has a 4-year degree and a master's degree. I mean, the applications we're getting when it comes to secondary education, it's really has changed, and which is a wonderful, wonderful change for law enforcement. So, I mean, we're halfway there to everybody on the department having a 4-year degree. Is it a requirement? No, absolutely not. I mean, if you came to us with the right tools and the right personality with a high school degree and we thought we could train you and put you, absolutely. I don't ever want to give the misnomer that you have to have that, but the trend is sure headed in the right direction. So let's talk about calls for service. And I just like to break this out by agency just to kind of show you county-wide where we stand as a department on these calls for service. And these are calls that came through the dispatch center that one required a response, or it required a service of even a civilian, like a records check on somebody, or a weapons permit, a NICS check. I mean, there's all those other things that are going on that create a CFS number. Didn't per se have to have a policeman go respond, but something had to happen and to provide a service. And so you'll see that the Burlington Police Department, we did 35,231. That's a big number. That's a big number compared to 5,566 and 4,761. So it's a busy place. That's all I'm trying to say. And if you ever took the time to turn on the scanner, or it's not really a scanner now, but took the time to stream the radio, you would see that it's a
busy place.
It's a busy place. So then this is just a little bit different breakdown of our calls for service, and we talked about this when we were talking about staffing levels and how our calls for service really started to come back up last year. And so you, as a department, you look at that and you see what's driving that. And one great thing that drove this number, you're going to see on another slide, is our suspicious person or suspicious incident. I mean, we have been campaigning and campaigning. If you see something, say something. And as you get out into the community and you start to build trust, they start to respond. And I think our suspicious calls were up in probably that 1,200 to 1,500 neighborhood in the year. So that's great news, and I'll preach that. If you see something that doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, call us. And if nothing comes out of it, nothing comes out of it. That's our job. That's what you're paying us to do. But more than likely, if you live there and you see something and you sense something, there's a reason for that, and we want to look at that. And then there's a breakdown that's in your book that is just a whole bunch of statistical numbers that feel free to look at, but we're not going to tie you up all night with that, but it's in the report. So as the slide goes on here, we're going to talk about our top 10 calls, and that's what I was saying. You'll see the first one is suspicious persons and vehicles. And if you remember back in 2012-13, for years and years, our #1 call was animal calls. And we talked and talked about how do we get that down. You know, we got to spend more time enforcing the code and more time to get out into the community and teach people and train people on what they should do with their dogs. So I think we're having some success in there. I mean, you'll see that in 15 and 16 our animal calls really didn't change, but they're down drastically compared to our suspicious persons and vehicles calls, which was a really good thing to see. If that suspicious is at the top of the list every year, that's wonderful. That is a wonderful thing to have. That means your citizens are calling the police department going, hey, we don't think something's necessarily right. And everything else just kind of, it's amazing year after year how close these numbers stay as they go down through there. And I got a separate slide for property damage, we'll go over that, but I mean, most of them, as you look at them, they just really stay close. So here I'll just touch on this briefly. This is just something we track every year, our yearly comparison of traffic citations. And again, if we had a chart of the grant dollars for traffic safety, you would see that it would just pretty much mirror the citations that are issued. Because when you're talking about 35 or 32,000 calls for service that are actually a police response, that slide you just saw was an actual police response. And you think about 365 days a year, you know, that's coming out to just a little shy of 100 calls a day. So if we didn't have those grant dollars where we could bring guys in on overtime and just specifically assign them to do traffic, it'd be difficult for us to do a lot of traffic enforcement. We'd do some, but it wouldn't be a lot. So here's our most frequent, 8 of them are citations that we issue in traffic. And so obviously speed's number 1, but the reason I really wanted to show you this slide is take a look at unlawful passing of school buses.
I know, I just saw that, wow.
Well, it's twofold. I mean, one of the things that has happened is they have cameras now, and they have cameras inside buses, outside buses. You pass a school bus, I've seen the video, you got a problem. And before it was, you know, hey, it was a blue Monte Carlo, and here's the time of day, and you kind of had to do an investigation, and if you could put it together, fine. Well, not now. I mean, it's not only a blue Monte Carlo, but a picture of who was driving it and the license plate number. So
92 of you.
Yeah, and that's it's an automatic suspension in today's world. So
can you refresh? If you come up to a school bus and you're in a 4-lane, you're going the same direction, and the yellow lights come on, do you have to stop?
No, yellow lights are to warn you that the red lights are coming on. Okay. It's kind of like a yellow light at an intersection. I mean, for sure, it wouldn't be to speed up and try to get around it. Let's proceed with caution here and slow down. But no, that's what the yellow lights are for. They're just telling you, here's what's about to happen next.
No proof of insurance is down.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Operating on intoxicated was up just a skosh. But like I said, look through those numbers, and it's pretty amazing how consistent they really stay. Let's just briefly talk about motor vehicle accidents. From 2010 to 2015, we had 0 traffic fatalities in the community. Unfortunately, last year we had 1 traffic fatality that involved a motorcycle. But since 2009 to 2016, we've had 2 fatalities in this community, and that's remarkable. I mean, that's something to be said for engineering of the roads has changed, and obviously all the safety equipment in vehicles and people wearing their seat belts. It really makes that big of a difference. So that's something we're pretty proud of. When you look at property damage accidents, if we could go back and look at the snowfall, you could almost bet that there'd be a direct correlation. I mean, our property accidents or damage are down a little bit, but in 16 we really didn't have much. It'll really be interesting to see what 17 has to bring as far as that number. Incidents, these directly relate to the calls of service, but an incident is actually, if you call us to your house and it is a reportable incident, in other words, somebody broke out your car window last night, that's vandalism, that's a reportable incident, and so then it gets reported as such at the police department. So our ratio from CFSs to incidents, just due to our size, is really high, which is a good thing. That means that we have the time and resources to turn your phone call into an incident. Here's a perfect example. If 2 cars back into each other in Kmart, well, that's gone, that's no good, Dick's parking lot,
There you go.
and we have an accident, that's actually on private property. And that's really not an incident to us unless there was drinking involved, reckless driving involved, driving under revocation would be some examples that you can't do that on private property. But as a department and as a service, we go out there, we take that report, we gather the facts, we file those reports, and it's actually an incident for the Burlington Police Department, but that's a good thing. That's a great thing. Where it becomes a little bit detrimental, as you'll see, all towns that are of similar size, take Burlington, Clinton, Fort Dodge, Marshalltown, Ottumwa, and you see those statistics that say your crime rate is so much higher than these other cities. Well, what that is we don't have the population to offset the incidents. And in the bigger the city you go, you're going to see this swing of calls for service and incidents. That ratio really starts to change because they're not going to have, as an example, they're not going to take a report on private property for a car accident. They're not going to do it. And something else that you could legally do under UCR, Unified Crime Reporting, is if somebody goes down the street and they have a BB gun and they shoot out 8 windows in a row, whether it's houses or cars, it's the same time, the same date, and basically the same place. You could create one incident. Even though it's 10, by UCR standards, you could say that was 1. And that's what you'll start to see in your bigger departments. Well, that's not the way with us. With us, that is 8 different incidents or 10 different incidents. Because now you want to file a report with the insurance company and they want a call for service number. And so that's service for us, and plus that's how we keep things separate in our organization. Everything is filed by CFS number. And if you're lumped in with 4 other people under that CFS number, it could be really hard to track that back. 2 years later, you want to talk about an incident that happened and where's that report. So that's just a little bit of background. We could talk for hours on how this reporting works, but just so you know, it's not always apples to apples. And then again, there's another breakdown of those incidents and some code, some chart tables there. Talk about arrest just briefly. When you look at those incidents and the percentage how that came up, your arrests are going to almost mirror that to a degree. It's obviously the few more incidents that you have, you're probably going to have a few more arrests. Just because those are cases that came in, whether it was burglary, vandalism, whatever the case may be, that got worked and somebody ended up getting arrested. So those have ticked up a little with our incidents. And here's something we did a little different this year. So we don't have a lot of comparative data, but I think it's something important that we start to try to track, or something that we pay attention to. I mean, take a look at that and look at the repeat offenders or the repeat people that we arrest. I mean, I was almost even amazed by it. I knew that we dealt with a lot of the same people over and over, but until you actually see it, it's a large number, to say the least.
Does that mean that there's been one person who's been arrested 14 times?
Absolutely, that's what that means.
What?
Is he in jail?
Well, not necessarily. You have. Oh yes, absolutely it is. And you have to remember that a lot of these are very, very minor offenses, but they need dealt with. Whether that's public intoxication, or whether, like I said, a simple vandalism, a simple assault. I mean, it might be minor in nature, but it has to be dealt with. No question about it.
Wow.
Well, and even look, just as an example, look at 3 arrests, 63 people.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And so when we talk about a very small percentage of people in the community, this isn't a prime example of that. When we talk about Burlington as a community as a whole, is a great, great place. But we do have a handful of people that have trouble getting it right.
Man.
But we're going to track that futuristically.
14 arrests. We've got Can't Get Right living here. I didn't know. I thought he moved. All right.
So we'll keep working on that.
Wow.
But we do track this, obviously, use of force, and this is a really impressive document. I mean, it is unbelievable that our incidents were up, our arrests were up, but yet our use of force was down. And that's just a tribute to the staff and the patrolmen of the Burlington Police Department doing their absolute very best to de-escalate situations instead of escalate
Kill
situations.
an excellent job with the good work.
It's a tough job, and they're really, really doing a good job at it. So I'm really proud of them for that. At the bottom, at the most current national average, which I can't find a very current number. I've looked and looked and looked, but the best I can come up with is 1.4 for police contacts. I don't even know where I'd go to start without looking back at every patrolman's log on to how many contacts do we have. This data isn't based on contacts. This data is actually based on arrests. And so where that number would fall nationally would really, really be low. So anyway, I'm really, really proud of the people of the department and their effort to use as little of force as possible.
Yes.
You guys saw this when I did my presentation on staffing, but I wanted to bring it back out because as those incidents went up, we all know that the violent crime went with it and the gun violence. And as we look as a whole, everything was fairly steady except for that. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt we had a lot of weapons violations, we had a lot of drug violations, our assaults were up, especially those in nature that are involved with this type of violence. So I just wanted to point that out to you that 42 people in 2016 were arrested for carrying weapons, and you're going to start to see some numbers, and that hasn't slowed down. I mean, just this last weekend, you're going to see a number of guns seized, but just this last weekend, they took 2 more guns off the street. And so this is becoming a regular occurrence. The good thing about that is they're out there doing it. And I mean, they're getting after it, and I think it's having an impact. The scary part of that is we got a lot of people carrying guns that don't have any permits or any reason to be doing that other than to commit an unlawful crime. So
You hear on the radio or see in the newspaper often, you'll see that so-and-so is a convicted felon with a gun. What is the penalty for that? Or what?
yeah, that's a Class D felony. It gets serious once you've got that felony. But in my opinion as a police chief, and I've let this opinion be known, where the problem lies is carrying weapons. That's an aggravated misdemeanor, and there's never any enhancement for it. You get arrested 10 times for it, and it's still an aggravated misdemeanor. When I think if you get it's like any other crime. I mean, OWI starts at a serious misdemeanor, aggravated misdemeanor, Class D felony. Well, why isn't carrying weapons an aggravated misdemeanor, a Class D felony? And it can stop there because the minute you reach that level, now if you carry weapons, you're a firearm with a felon. And so that really has some teeth in it. But why isn't there an enhancement for carrying weapons? Why isn't there? And it's a question that I've asked many, many times, and I won't quit asking. And I'm not talking about the lawful ownership of guns. I want to make myself very clear about that. I'm talking about the unlawful carrying of weapons.
Right.
In the 74 shots fired, that's exactly a very, very accurate number. I mean, if you call into the Burlington Police Department and say you got shots fired, we come investigate it, and if we can't find any evidence of that, casings in the street, multiple witnesses, bullet holes in something, it's going to get marked down as one of those suspicious calls. We got called there, but we don't want to. We want to make sure that if a transformer pops or if a car backfires, that this data is as accurate as we can make it. So those 74 calls, I will guarantee you there was a shot fired of some type. And that's an alarming trend when you look at that chart. Oops, this might go again. So I just wanted to bring you up to date again on the POP unit. And these statistics are actually from July, so this is 6 or 7 months of statistics here. But it's for a 2-man unit, it is phenomenal what they've accomplished if you just kind of peruse down through there. And again, I'll just talk about those felony arrests, the gun seized, and then the different types of drugs that that unit is taking off the streets. But at the same time, they're still in those neighborhoods every day playing basketball and building rapport. So they fully understand the balance that we're looking for out of this unit. I mean, if you're going to carry a gun and you're going to have drugs, we're going to deal with you. But at the same time, if you're not, we want to build relationships, and we want you to tell us who are doing these things. So, I mean, it has just been an absolute great program for us. But department-wide, our gun seizure, and I know this excludes 4 guns, because it was just the time it was printed, 64 guns seized. And these guns were seized through traffic stops, search warrants. I mean, these aren't guns that were just turned into the police department, or these were actual guns that people that had them weren't supposed to have them. And that's a lot of guns for a year. Now something a little bit more positive, but our community involvement, you know, again, I'll go back to 2012 and 2013 when we kind of started to head the department in a positive direction when we talked about community policing. We didn't want to just use the term. We wanted to live the term. And I think if you take some time to look down through there, you'll see that we are involved in an awful lot of activities. And, you know, Sunday was a pretty good example of that. You know, what a turnout.
I wasn't
you
going to
know.
say anything about it, but I'm glad you brought it up. I'll wait till you're done.
Yeah, I'll just cut you off at the pass. Our offense is bad, our defense is horrible. But anyway, what a wonderful day. I mean, you talk about smiles and, you know.
It was awesome.
Shout out to Annie. She was supporting the event in more than one way, and thank you very much. And you know what I mean, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
And this picture here with the officers coming down the steps at that football game, that was really a neat night, too.
Yeah, that was wonderful,
great.
the color guard.
Yeah.
In the lower right, that's actually a city employee that's one of our reserve officers. That's Officer Ben Cooper, reserve officer with the mask on at Shop with a Cob. And he was having a lot of fun that day, so. So we are involved in the community. So let's talk a little bit about 2017, and you can kind of read these on their own, but I mean, obviously our absolute number one priority is to use every resource we have available to reduce the gun violence in this town. I mean, without a doubt, that's our number one goal. Yeah, we definitely want to get moved into that facility. We already talked about CIT. We're going to have to develop a policy and get a solid policy that everybody can agree on, not only the police department, the council, but the community.
Yeah.
You know, we need to agree on this thing. And as soon as we do, we'll implement that and get our reader plate program in place. We've already talked about the officers and CID and our goals there. And then we just met for the first time today. This is going to be a really, really exciting thing, but we're going to try to put together a one-day citizen academy, if you will, for youth. And it's really going to be a big event. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. Provide them with lunch and just see what we can do. But all the departments in law enforcement in the county are going to participate in that. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
When are you doing that?
I think they're looking at August, like tentatively August 2nd. It's a tentative date, but yeah, so questions, any questions? I know I kind of got through that. I mean, everybody in the room probably thinks, no, you really didn't, but.
Questions for the chief?
I thought you did well, chief. Thanks.
No, thanks for having me, and thanks for
Thanks
listening, I appreciate it.
Thanks to all you guys and gals, too.
I'll do that, thank you.
Mr. Tislin, you got anything before we close out?
I did just want to mention the roundabout on our Facebook page. It had been posted. On the City of Burlington, Iowa government Facebook page, the roundabout was posted. There's a YouTube video on roundabouts and a link on information.
Cool.
Over 17,000 people this has reached so far, so this is a good tool to get that out there. But go to the city's Facebook page and check out more information on roundabouts. There is a separate web page that talks about this roundabout and description, schedule, map, details, so.
Well, Rusty Rogerson gave it a thumbs up, so it's got to be good, right?
Is that available just on the regular city website too, then?
Yeah, is
Is
this?
that what it is?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Just click on roundabout.
Okay.
Is that all you got? I think that was plenty. Annie?
Yeah, so Sunday, we had so much fun at the basketball game, the police department versus Midwest Magic. I don't know if I saw the mayor, and that was good to see him. It was so much fun. There's a lot more to it this year too. It just it gets more fun every year. Yeah, and it's a great way to support just being there, and also there are other ways to support. You know, there was some silent auctions, some live auctions, all kinds of fun stuff to participate in. And then this Sunday, if you've ever wanted to, you know, see what's going on downtown, upstairs is a perfect opportunity to get into some of those rentals and condos and things like that. So from noon to 4 this Sunday, you can do that. And there's tickets at the Iowa store, Weird Herald's, the Medium. I think you can do it also online. I know there's one place I'm looking forward to looking inside, which would be the Tama building. That's it for me.
Good enough. Councilman?
I'm done for the night.
Okay, he's done for the night. I just wanted to throw in again that I was at the Midwest Magic game. It was phenomenal. I just want to say that I'm really disappointed. You know, we upped their budget 5 times. I know Mike Furman is watching. We upped their budget 5 times so that they could practice, get all the practice that they needed so that they could bring the title back to the city of Burlington. I'm really disappointed and let down. I know it wasn't for lack of effort. I know you guys tried, so I'll leave it at that. Fantastic event. Just phenomenal. Again, it never lets down. So if you guys have not been to a Midwest Magic game, well, you got 360 some odd days that you'll have to wait, but it's going to be a good time. So you can start planning ahead. That's all I've got. Mayor Pro Tem.
Maybe you ought to consider being their coach.
You know,
see what kind of.
That was a cheap move right there. Actually, that was really bad.
See what kind of harm that. No.
See how bad they really get beat then. I'm good. All right.
I'm good.
Okay, city manager.
I got to tour the Tama building last week.
He thinks
So,
he's better.
You didn't invite me.
No,
How's
I
it
didn't.
going?
It was
Rude.
about 2 hours and very good tour. They still have an awful lot of work to get done in there, but it is amazing to see the progress that they have made and some of the alterations that they've had to do over time to try to meet. I mean, one of the biggest things, the Historical Society and some of the things that they had to do to meet SHPO requirements has really pushed them back and caused them to do some different things. But it is neat to see how they've adjusted to make that happen. We've had 2 different projects that we're needing to get some follow-up done on. I'm supposed to meet with Brian Anderson to talk about the Apollo building yet this week. I don't know if we're going to be in a position to have something the next work session, but hopefully we are. This was the first time we're able to get something coordinated to meet with him. Matt Murray is still doing some background work that he needs to get done prior to talking with us about trying to do some talks about what a lease arrangement might look like. So that is still in progress. We're still waiting for him to be where he's prepared to take that next step. So that is still moving forward. It's just going to take some time.
Okay.
And I think that's it for what I had for now. So.
Good. Okay. Well, that's it for tonight. We thank everybody. Good night.
Thank you, Council. Thank you.